Dus is Boydham, haar Corda Condin in the Nal, Facha Moore, her Gatana, which he an Ockage, specialty Shaw, a Malafe, and you, Agasmuch, a Kelleru, and Conskadel CatchmentCARE. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Liam Ward. I'm Deputy Chief Executive for Donegal County Council. And I'm delighted to welcome you all here this morning to our celebratory event for the CatchmentCARE project. I want to especially acknowledge the presence of our Cahiria, Councillor Liam Pliny, other elected representatives, special guests, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be associated with today's conference, which will showcase the success of the CatchmentCARE project, which closes this month after 5.5 years. I wish to begin again by extending a warm welcome to you all who have travelled to Donegal and to those who are joining us online. It's great to see such a keen interest and a packed hall for today's celebration. I suppose on behalf of Donegal County Council, we were delighted to lead this cross-border project, which has made a significant contribution to restoring water quality in 3 important cross-border river catchments. All of that was made possible by the European Union's Interreg 5A programme, which provided funding of almost €14 million, which was approved for the CatchmentCARE project by the special EU programmes body. I'm delighted that Patricia Armstrong, Programme Manager at SEUPB, has joined us today and will speak to you shortly on the programmes that they manage and their plans for the period ahead, which we certainly look forward to. I also wish to acknowledge the match funding in excess of over €2 million, which was provided through the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs in Northern Ireland and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage in Ireland. These significant budgets reflect the challenge the programme partners were faced with. On behalf of the partnership of eight organisations involved, I would like to acknowledge our appreciation for this level of support provided through the SEUPB. As most of you will be aware, the CatchmentCARE project aimed to improve the freshwater quality in the Arnie, Blackwater and Finn River catchments through the development of water quality improvement projects. The project also included the installation of 50 boreholes across the region, which provides a better understanding of groundwater quality. However, equally important, and I think where a lot of learning took place, was how the project provided a platform for the cross-border engagement and knowledge sharing between community, governance, policy and scientific shareholders. I'm looking forward to hearing more of that reflected in today's 3 distinct conference themes. This project represented a unique cross-border partnership that has provided a platform for knowledge exchange between universities, local councils and scientific organisations. It has successfully delivered on a number of core outputs within the EU's Interreg 5A programme that have been designed to both protect and enhance our precious biodiversity on both sides of the border and contribute towards compliance with the EU Water Framework Directive. Today the project outputs will be reflected across the 3 distinct themes, including the positive community action and outreach work, which makes real and tangible connections with a range of stakeholders such as farmers, anglers, community groups and impressively with the local schools across the 3 catchments. As we know, river catchments don't recognise county or indeed transnational boundaries, and so this cross-border project offered an excellent opportunity for the partnership to engage with stakeholders across the jurisdictions and to ensure a more integrated approach to improving water quality. I would like to extend my thanks to all involved in the project delivery, to all the staff and contractors employed by the partners from Ireland and Northern Ireland, and this includes the local authority partners, Donegal County Council, Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council, who formed a close working relationship which we look forward to developing further. Also the academic-based partners, including the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute and University of Ulster, and the specialist groundwater partners, including the Geological Survey of Ireland and the British Geological Survey. And finally, our state partners, including the Inland Fisheries, Ireland and the Loss Agencies. And I think when you hear the range of partners and agencies that have been involved in delivering this project, it was truly a very broad and wide-ranging partnership which has delivered on the outputs of CatchmentCARE. But to make improvements at a catchment scale, it is vital to work in partnership like the CatchmentCARE did, that is focused on conserving, protecting and respecting our natural environment to ensure the future sustainability of our shared catchments, which will offer so much to our communities. An integrated CatchmentCARE management approach is essential to achieving the sustainable use of our shared water and land resources in Ireland. I would like also to extend our thanks and appreciation to the various staff at the Special EU Programmes Body who contributed throughout the project lifetime. Finally, my thanks to the partnership for organising the range of speakers and panellists included on today's agenda. It will no doubt provide us with an insight into how the CatchmentCARE project has contributed to achieving good ecological status in our shared river catchments. Clearly, the learning from the project will ensure that the actions taken are transferable beyond the three catchments and also contribute to a strong project legacy. As European partners, our national policies are set within the EU Water Framework Directive, which is an important piece of legislation which aims to improve water quality in our rivers, lakes and groundwater, amongst others. Ultimately, the real goal of the Water Framework Directive is to help communities to protect and improve a beautiful and diverse landscape with accessible, healthy waterways that are productively used to support livelihoods, habitats and rich wildlife. We will see today how this project and a strong, cohesive cross-border partnership made that a reality across the three conference themes. And in conclusion, I would like to thank you all today for attending. I hope you find the conference interesting and worthwhile, and I look forward to meeting more of you as the day progresses. But as I'm representing Donegal County Council as the lead partner, I want to mention as well staff within the council who have contributed so much to the delivery on behalf of our role as the lead partner within the CatchmentCARE project. I want to specifically mention Michelle McDade, Dara Coyne, Justina as well, and Joanne Holmes, Dr. Joe Ferry and his team, and our previous Director of Services in that area, Joe Peoples. But I want to reserve a final word for a senior engineer who was led from Donegal County Council part in this partnership, and that's Con McLaughlin. And I want to pay particular tribute to yourself, Con, for the way in which this project was managed, so very well done. So, thank you for your attention during those opening remarks. It is now my great pleasure to call upon Patricia Armstrong, the Programme Manager with the SEUPB, to address you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liam. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to join you all here today in beautiful Donegal for the conference to celebrate 5 years of innovative and effective cross-border cooperation on CatchmentCARE and the successful conclusion of the project which the SUPB has been proud to support. To provide you with some background, the SUPB is a cross-border organisation established within the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. With the support of the EU, the British and Irish governments has been delivering a vital and continued source of funding to the sum of €3.39 billion into Northern Ireland and the 6 border counties since 1999 in efforts to drive and sustain both prosperity and peace. There are currently 70 Interreg programmes exist across Europe, which are designed to address the challenges that borders present. CatchmentCARE received approval from the SUPB back in November 2017 with a budget of €13.8 million. This has been a project of considerable scale and with significant impact. Its purpose was to establish projects to improve and restore water quality across 3 cross-border river catchments, namely the Army, the Blackwater and the Finn, to install over 50 groundwater monitoring stations and to leave a positive legacy for communities to continue looking after the local rivers. As we celebrate 5 years of cooperation and the conclusion of the project, I think we can see just how successful the CatchmentCARE project has been in delivering its objectives. Before I go any further, I must take the opportunity to thank Liam Ward, the Chief Executive of Donegal County Council, for his positive opening remarks this morning and for the pivotal role that the Council has played as lead partner in this project over the past 5 years. The Council has a strong track record in coordinating and delivering cross-border projects, and CatchmentCARE has benefited from this dedication and commitment to building strong working relationships with all of the project partners. I was struck by the breadth of topics which are going to be covered in today's activities, from community action and local education programmes to protecting and restoring water quality and promoting resource efficiency. For me, this reflects the truly wide-ranging work and initiatives which CatchmentCARE has been involved in over the last 5 years. It has also been heartening to see the educational and awareness-raising programmes led by Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council, which have been developed with local children and wider communities to increase their understanding and pride of these local rivers so that they are better equipped to become the future stewards of their own natural environment. As we all know, 2023 marks a significant milestone for the island of Ireland as we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, which led to the establishment of the SUPB and other cross-border bodies. It is also an important time for SUPB as we look to the future and prepare for the forthcoming launch of the Peace Plus programme, a new ambitious cross-border funding programme totalling €1.1 billion, designed to support peace and prosperity across Northern Ireland and the border counties of Ireland, and which build upon the work that's previously been funded under the Peace and Interreg programmes. The Peace Plus programme is in partnership with the European Union, the governments of the United Kingdom and Ireland, and the Northern Ireland Executive. The Peace Plus programme will encompass both the Interreg and peace elements and will continue to provide investment for the economic, social and environmental development of Northern Ireland and the cross-border area to support stability, sustainability and growth. At present, SUPB are preparing for the funding calls, and we're currently hosting pre-development workshops to help potential projects prepare their applications. For more information about these workshops and about the Peace Programme in general, please go to the SUPB website and our social media channels for updates. At present, the legal agreements for the programme are in process of being finalised, and we hope that this will be completed in May, with calls issuing thereafter. All that remains for me to do today is to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all today, and as the project comes to a close, to congratulate CatchmentCARE and the 8 project partners, Donegal County Council, Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Council, the Ulster University, Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute, the Geographical Survey of Ireland, British Geographical Survey, Inland Fisheries and the Lochs Agency. The project partners involved have been a sterling example of productive and collaborative partnerships and have driven the success and the long-lasting impact of the CatchmentCARE project. On that note, I would like to thank you all and to wish you well in your future endeavours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia, and again, just on behalf of the partnership, just to acknowledge the huge role played by SEUPB. Without your support and funding, clearly this project would not have happened, so thank you very much for that again. An oversight on my behalf in terms of naming staff within the council, dangerous thing to do I know, but I did overlook to mention both Andrea Harkin and Fidel Maher, who played a pivotal role from the council's point of view as well, so to mention their contribution to the project as well. I'm now going to invite our Cathaoirleach of Donegal County Council, Councillor Liam Blaney, to say a few words to provide the official welcome here to the conference this morning and also the opening remarks. So, Councillor Blaney.
Thanks very much, Liam. Elected representatives, Deputy Chief Executive and Director of Donegal County Council, Liam Ward, and another director down there is Michael McGarvey. I don't see any other directors here, but usually there's one behind us over. To the staff, as Liam had already mentioned, that worked on the project, and especially to Colin here, the project manager, special guests. I'm delighted to welcome you here to the Villa Rose Hotel this morning for the closing conference for the CatchmentCARE project. I'd like to extend a special word of thanks to Julie McLaughlin from the renowned Henry Gears for the lovely music during the registration. I would like to begin by extending a warm Donegal welcome to all in attendance this morning, especially those who have made long journeys and to those who couldn't be with us in person but are joining remotely today. I hope you all find the event worthwhile and informative. I'm delighted to be associated with the closing conference for the CatchmentCARE project, that we could host such an event again here in Donegal and within the Fun catchment, which is fitting. This project has made a significant contribution to improving water quality and the 3 cross-border catchments, which I'm looking forward to hearing all about. The Interreg 5A programme was designed to enhance cross-border cooperation, promote reconciliation, and create a more peaceful and prosperous society. I think the CatchmentCARE project was particularly successful in these areas and is testament to the strong cross-border partnership developed from the 8 organisations involved. As we all know, river catchments transcend borders, and to address the challenges faced in declining water quality, we must take an integrated and holistic approach. In this case, that challenge was met by that partnership of 8 organisations, which were all committed to making improvements in water quality in our rivers and lakes. And I am delighted the Donegal County Council were a part of and indeed led that partnership. Today is a celebratory event to showcase the success of CatchmentCARE, and we'll be hearing about some of the works undertaken to restore water quality in 3 important cross-border river catchments. I was speaking earlier about the project to Colin McLaughlin, the senior engineer to manage the project, and he tells me that the partnership is incredibly proud of the success of CatchmentCARE, and they are looking forward to sharing their experiences with others. This event is a celebration of 5 years' hard work and dedication, and we hope that it will inspire others to pursue their own innovative ideas and initiatives to improve fresh water quality in their local areas. I would like to convey my thanks to the local team who worked on the project, but equally to all those who contributed from across the partnerships. All your contributions are valued and appreciated. My thanks also to the funders, to Gina McIntyre and her team at SEUPB, and Interreg funding of almost 12 million, and to the government departments who provided the match funding of over 2 million. The Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs Northern Ireland, and the Department of Housing, Planning and Local Government in Ireland. I won't take up any more of your time, but hope you enjoy the conference and the networking opportunities these events offer. I would like to finish up now on behalf of Donegal County Council. I again extend a warm welcome to all attendees and now declare this conference open. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach Blaney, and we're delighted that you're able to be with us this morning. And it's so important that the Cathaoirleach of the Council was here to offer those opening remarks. So my final duty of this morning now is to introduce to you Ella McSweeney, who obviously is a well-known journalist and television presenter who's worked for RTE, BBC and indeed the Guardian newspaper. And Ella will facilitate the remainder of today's proceedings, which will commence, I believe, with a reflection of the CatchmentCARE project. So I'm delighted to welcome Ella McSweeney onto the stage.
Elected representatives and guests, thank you so much. Thank you, Liam. I'm just delighted to be here this morning, and I must say I'm really looking forward to the next couple of hours. We've got 3 sessions, and I'm really excited about hearing about the project itself, and most importantly, I suppose, the legacy it leaves for the future, and also, perhaps most importantly in all these things, for the young people of the area. You know, this is a major publicly funded project involving these 3 beautiful, majestic catchments, the Finn, Blackwater and the Arnie, and the culmination of what sounds like 5 years of, as has been mentioned, you know, hard work and dedication by so many of you, which, as I said, is going to leave an important, strong legacy. In many ways, it sounds from just some of the chats I've had this morning that the work has only just started. It reminds me of an aeroplane that gets up, and as soon as you're up, you're back down again. 5 years can fly by, especially when you have the challenge of COVID in the middle of it. But the successes are many. And the vital thing now is to mark those successes, to celebrate those successes here this morning, and make sure that this incredibly important and good work continues for generations ahead of us. And provide a basis for future projects, and also critically policy formation. So as I said, we have 3 sessions this morning. We're tight for time, so I'm going to crack on. Just obviously, if you can, for your own safety, just have a quick look at the emergency exits if anything happens. And also, could I ask you all to just dig your hands into your pockets and just make sure that your phones are switched off or to silent, just so there's no interruptions. I have my phone because I'm the timekeeper this morning, so if you see me looking at it, that's what I'm doing. We are going to be tight for time, so we're going to get through a lot of different sessions this morning and chats as well. So the first session is focused on community action and outreach. And we have this core backbone of community and resilience, which is obviously so important. Such a central part of this project was involving the community and the stakeholders. And projects were funded to enhance education and to enhance engagement with the public. It's not all about the facts and the data, it is also about engagement and having an emotional connection to these phenomenal waterways as well. And I think it's no surprise to hear, as I've heard, that there was such important and big demand by the general public for this kind of engagement. So I'm delighted to introduce Andy Griggs. You can see Andy there, you can read his biography. He's been working in environmental conservation and education for over 30 years, having worked in the Middle East and Europe, carrying out various conservation projects. And for the past 23 years, he's been involved in environmental education. He currently works in the CatchmentCARE project to deliver and develop the communications, community engagement, and education aspects of the work. And after Andy's presentation, we will have a discussion with 3 of the key community stakeholders as well to tease out some of those really critical points of learning and positive points that this amazing project is going to leave. So I'm delighted to first introduce Andy to come up on the stage and give us his presentation. Andy.
Thank you, Ella. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here to present this morning. The first thing I'm going to do is get that photograph of me. It's been up there for at least an hour. I'm thinking of you on your lunch later on. I want you to enjoy your lunch and not remember that. Thank you. Yes, so my name is Andy Griggs. I work for Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council, and was very fortunate to be able to be the Assistant Manager and Education Officer for the last 5 years on the CatchmentCARE project. So ABC Council had the onus of rolling out all the communications work for the project and doing the community and our education programs. So I've got 10 minutes to present 5 years of community engagement and education work. So you will keep me right with the time out, okay? Because there's a wee bit in here, but I'll skip through this. A lot of the information I'm going to tell you is also on our display boards on the left-hand side, so all the facts and figures you can read up again anyway. As with all these projects, it was very important for us to have a bottom-up approach and to make sure that communities were involved and they were understanding about their local river catchments, the issues and the pressures on their local rivers and associated water bodies, and to be part of the solution and to get involved with working with projects and to put something back and to be actively engaged on their local rivers. So, as with all these projects, we had a whole variety of different communication methods. I won't go through them, you can see them there. That was the way we got our messages out: newsletters, press releases, events, activities, all different flyers, information, leaflets, videos, all communication methods. All of these are on our legacy website, which is being developed, on our YouTube channel and on Facebook page. You can find a lot of those there. However, one of the most important things for us, and we had from SEBB a target to roll out a community incentive scheme. So when we started to design this, we looked at how we can engage with local communities. So what we did was we rolled out a scheme where we were to give out funding for up to €25,000 to groups on projects. We did fund larger projects if we thought applicable in the 3 catchments. And the projects, the applications were open to a whole variety of different groups, and you can see them there: voluntary groups and community groups, farming groups, NGOs, schools, all organisations, sports clubs could apply for a project that they thought would help them to look after their local rivers. So we rolled the first stage of this out in 2019. And they were the kind of project we were looking for. We were looking for something that would be biodiversity work, streamscapes projects, access works, river trails, bio-blitzes, building up people's awareness and appreciation, understanding of their local rivers. Interpretation, signage was a big part of the work as well. And we did fund a lot of education programs within the actual community scheme as well. We had a series of launch events across the 3 catchments, and they went very well. All the partners in CatchmentCARE came along and did demonstrations and workshops, and we had around about 220 people from different community groups across the 3 catchments, which turned up to the launch events. We then rolled out the first phase of the CIS. So 17 projects in total were then funded in the first phase. And again, I'm not going to go through them now. We have 3 projects in the Arnie catchment, 3 in the Finn, and 11 in the Blackwater. It says 10 in brackets, so I'll come back to that and explain that in a while. Very, very, very successful program. A lot of demand. The catchment officers across the 3 catchments were involved with helping to build up the projects with the groups. So there was a lot of one-to-one contact between us as staff and the community members. And we helped to tease out projects and see what would work and what wouldn't. And when the project was funded, we then helped to deliver that. So we just didn't give the money out to the groups. We kept hold of the procurement, and we helped to physically deliver the projects to the groups. So we did all of the work behind the scenes for the groups, which I think you'll hear later on from our colleagues in the community groups was a very beneficial aspect to a lot of the groups. They found that very useful, that we were helping to deliver the project right the way through from inception, right the way through to delivery. So the learnings from phase 1, there was a lot of demand there, as I said. And they're the figures, again, I'm not going to go through them, but they are the bottom line figures of what we delivered. So there was trails, there was interpretive panels, we funded lots of different bits of equipment, scientific equipment, a lot of citizen science projects were going on. There were a lot of events and bio-blitzes happening, and litter cleanups and awareness days and have a go days and get down to your river days, education work, and the bottom line figures there at the end there. I'm going to skip through this quite quickly, and my apologies. Phase 2, we thought so successful, there was money in the budget, so we rolled out an entire separate phase 2 of the CIS. Couldn't do the launch event, so we obviously promoted that through our networks, that the scheme was open again. And we had another huge demand for the projects across the 3 catchments. And in phase 2, we ran a further 20 projects, so 37 separate community projects were funded over the past 5 years of the CatchmentCARE project. And again, the projects there. Some of them were repeat projects, so if we had a group came in initially for phase 1, they had the confidence then to reapply and to build on their project and build on their phase 1 project. Some of the groups came in that heard about phase 1 and they wanted to then get funded, and we had a whole raft of new groups that were funded. And again, I'm not going to go through those, but we had all the figures there, and you can read those later. I'm not going to bore you with those now. And just to show you a geographical distribution of the projects across the Army catchment there, right the way from Upper and Lower Loch you can see a good distribution of the phase 1 and 2 projects. The Blackwater again, the biggest of the catchments, so naturally there was a lot more interest, a lot more community groups there, and people working with their local rivers and catchments, so there was a good spread across the whole of the Blackwater. And again, the Finn, even though there were slightly less projects, you can see there's a good wee spread, and there was groups right across the Finn catchment as well. And that's our overall figures. Again, I'm not going to go through, but safe to say it was an incredibly successful part of the project. And for myself as an educator and a community worker, I think it was a fascinating way and a great way of just leaving a legacy that people can get involved with their rivers, understand them, and also it's left a lot of confidence in the communities, and they're now applying for bigger funding or further funding to build on their own projects that we funded through CatchmentCARE. There's a whole legacy document which will be available on our legacy website, so you can read about every single one of those projects. There's a page dedicated to every single project, and you can read all about them there. When I said there was 11 projects in the Blackwater, we actually turned one of those projects into a training program. We worked to do a physical training program, but during COVID, obviously we couldn't get people out, we couldn't get the facilitators out, so we ran an online training program. And there's different programs there, different courses and modules online, and there were virtually nearly 200 people that which signed up and successfully completed that online course. So there's elements of water safety and habitats assessments and scoring the rivers. Then we come on to our education program. Again, a very successful part of the work, and one of the educators, Alan Jones, is here today, so you'll get a chance to have a chat with Alan about the education work. And for me, as an environmental education, I thought it was imperative that we got the young people involved in the project in some way. Our target at the beginning was 30 schools and 900 pupils. That was the target that was set for us. We also thought it was a great opportunity to develop skills and confidence in teachers as well, on how to teach river education and biodiversity education as well. So we ran out 3 phases. We had a pilot program, which Alan rolled out in 2019. We visited 8 schools across the 3 catchments. They went on river visits, they did kick sampling, they assessed their local rivers. They went down to Marble Arch Caves to look at underground water and temporal and spatial flow of underground water. They went to fisheries to look at habitat work and fisheries. And they did a lot of schools work, and they all designed their own videos. And there's 4 videos now. 2 in the Finn, there was one in English and one in Irish, and there was one in the Blackwater and the Arnie, and the kids are narrating their journey, their story of learning about their river and their local catchment. We were then going to go straight back into the schools and build on the education programme. Unfortunately, when COVID hit, we couldn't. So we thought, what do we do? And Alan had a fantastic idea. I think it was your idea, wasn't it? Let's go online. Let's carry on the journey with the children, but let's go online. Let's do a series of programs called The River. And that was so successful, the series 1 of The River, and we sent that into the schools we were working with initially. And it was a whole series of workshops, and they had activities, and they could do experiments and take out home worksheets, and it just allowed the teachers to carry on teaching about their rivers whilst they couldn't get out of school, and some schools couldn't even get into the school grounds to do any kind of education work. So this is a really good way, and it was sent into all different schools. And again, by 2021, we still couldn't get into the classroom, so we rolled out Series 2 of The River. And again, all of those 10 episodes are available on the YouTube channel, and every single one of them has teacher notes and worksheets, and the pupils and the children and the teachers can use one of those. And the feedback, I have to say, from the schools was phenomenal. It was really good. And by Series 2, we just took the gloves off and said, look, any school can have this. We're not going to be protected. If the school wants to use this, they can. And I'll show you the end figures on where we are with that. There's some of the worksheets and the materials there. Alan, that wasn't me. That wasn't me. Tom made me put that photograph of you in. Okay, it was either me or you with the wing. Okay, but that's Tom's fault. Alan was doing poetry corner, cookery corner, all different experiments, and the kids absolutely loved it. And by the end of 2022, we managed to get back into the schools in 22 and do a roadshow. So we went out to another 26 schools across the 3 catchments, and we tied all the education work together, gave them all the resources, gave them all the links to the different organisations that could carry on doing education work with them. And that's the bottom line figures for our education programme. It was to be 30 schools and 900 children. We ended up sending out the river programmes, or talking to physically and engaged with 172 schools, 280 teachers, and over 5,500 children. So again, a really unique and a really good legacy for the project, both the education and the community work. A very, very good legacy for CatchmentCARE. Again, there's a legacy education document which will be available, and that details the whole of the journey of learning and recommendations obviously as well there. And that is a very, very quick whistle-stop tour of education and community. Thank you.
Phenomenal, thank you. 9 minutes. 5 years and 9 minutes, it's great. Without further ado, I want to invite 3 guests onto the stage. Aidan Donnelly, Armagh Fisheries, Enda Fields, Emmy Vale Towns, and Anna Jones from AS Jones Education. And we're going to have 13-minute discussion about this aspect of the project. So gentlemen, if you'd like to come and take a seat here. And they were all involved in what has just been outlined by Andy. Enda, Emmy Vale Towns, I mean, one of the things that really struck me from the details of this part of the project is the fact, and as boring as it sounds, the fact that the kind of paperwork was taken away from you and it could leave community initiatives like yourselves to do what you do best.
Yes, of course, it was actually fantastic. Just to give you a background, Emmy Vale Towns were in existence about 50 years, and I've been involved in Emmy Vale Towns the last 7 years. And one of the things that I'm an angler as well, so a few hats on here. So yes, during the process, the meetings with Andy here and Tom and the funding application aspect was so easy, and took a lot of pressure off us as a community group, Teddy Towns. We didn't have to, start thinking about a lot of stuff. The ease of, talking to Andy and Tom met us on a regular basis from the start to give us a few ideas of how to go about things. We had to get planning permission for Eco Trail in Emmy Vale, so we did an Eco Trail along the riverbank, which the riverbank in Emmy Vale is very steep, and you couldn't actually see into the river. So we had a cleared area, we had planning permission for that. We had to get some, we met with the Inland Fisheries Ireland, we met with the OPW, Office of Public Works. We also discussed, we had to get an ecologist involved in relation to the reports for the plan application itself. So we had to get the plan application through first. That probably was the hardest part of it. After that, it was really smooth running with the actual application and getting the funding and doing the works.
Because for people who aren't involved in small community groups like quite substantial now, tiny groups, it is such a faff, isn't it, to have to deal with paperwork. It takes up a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of headspace and energy.
It's hard to get volunteers for a start, but so having it easy for any community group, and you get more volunteers involved if the paperwork end of things, administration end of it is less, So from our experiences, it was fantastic. What do you call it? It's one of the best projects I was ever on. Regarding most projects, you have to get make it 80% funding, maybe 90%, and you have to always, the community group has to fundraise then for the rest of the 10 or 20%. So from that end of it was fantastic, and just dealing with Andy and Tom and that, it was very, very easy. Construction works, went ahead. But again, any job there's always problem when it comes to construction, and things just sort of go as smooth as you like on every day or every week. But overall, we as a community group were really, really impressed on how the whole CatchmentCARE and the chair part, which is underlined up here above us, the chair part was really, they did care for us. There's no question about that.
And Aidan from Armagh Fisheries, I mean, you were involved in opening up the lake, there was new trails, education, you also had different equipment like Neptune rigs as well that were involved. Just talk a little bit about the 5 years in 30 seconds for you and what legacy it's left for you.
Well, I'm involved in the Armagh Angling Club, and you've known Tom Woods and Andy for quite a number of years. And water quality is at the centre of everything that we do within regards to our angling. We run our own hatchery. On water quality, we've seen it decrease actually over the number of years that I've been involved in angling. And this project that CatchmentCARE facilitated us to undertake allowed local people to take a local interest in a local water, to take ownership of it, not just the anglers, but schools, children, scout groups, bird watchers, walkers, to actually have eyes and ears on the lakes and on our streams, our feeder streams, and actually feed back to us issues of water quality. The equipment that was supplied was a Neptune rake, which allowed us to take out an invasive pond weed called Nuttall's weed, and we're working on that year on year. But the access paths that CatchmentCARE helped us to actually make around the lake helps us get that equipment safely around with limited numbers of volunteers, as you were saying, and it usually falls to the same sort of group. But I have to also say that the process of the grant application to CatchmentCARE for local community groups is very simple, very straightforward, and most funders that I've dealt with in the past, you don't see them eye to eye. It's through emails, through the web. To have face-to-face meetings with people who have a strong interest in the local area, local waters, really grounds it.
And did you always know, sorry to interrupt, but did you always know that that energy, that interest was there somewhere, but you needed some sort of catalyst, an enzyme to make it actually happen?
Do you know, I think there's two enzymes that I would have to mention. One is obviously CatchmentCARE and their absolute enthusiasm to roll out projects that really left a legacy. And the other thing, and if you could say one positive thing about COVID, was that during COVID, people realised that the great outdoors was actually great, not just for your physical health, but for your mental health. And I think we've seen that grow in our club. Since CatchmentCARE, we have seen a 30% increase in our membership, with a huge growth in our junior section. I think that's largely down to CatchmentCARE and people realising that actually local people make a difference on local waters and local rivers. I think CatchmentCARE have really hit it on the head here.
That's fantastic here. I mean, Alan, formulating the education side of things, we'll talk about COVID in a minute. How important is it? You know, we often think with education we're focusing on students, but how important is it to upskill the teachers?
Almost essential. Each year group rolls on, so we weren't going to have the same group every year. So it's vital to first and foremost get the principal involved, so that they can enthuse their teachers or earmark particular teachers within the school. And then to work alongside those teachers, enthusing them first of all that this is something that they can use, and then upskilling them, showing them, demonstrating in the classroom that this is not complicated, it doesn't demand a whole load of knowledge, we would bring that with us. The difficulty I think with a programme like this is you can always go in and create a file of a programme, a piece of material, and I think one of the things that sort of rings in my ears is a comment from David Coffey, the principal of Florence Court School, right at the very beginning when we first went out to meet him. And he says, is this going to be another one of those projects that I get a nice file at the end that sits on the shelf? Because there are hundreds of those. What he wanted was something that was practical, something that would mean something to the kids that were going through the programme at the time, something that would upskill his teachers, that they would be able to roll it on. And for us, that was the legacy of all of this. It was about making sure that this would continue after the life of the 5-year programme that we had, yeah.
And I mean, there weren't many good things about COVID, but obviously the fact that you had to go online means that legacy is really cemented, because not only are the ripples being felt in the community, but anyone can now, as I understand it, can use the rivers.
There was a moment where we had to pivot, because we had 1 year of a pilot programme which we knew worked and had been quite successful. The intention was just to go back in and roll that out again with the schools and sort of cement that and build on it. The idea was that we would take a break, see where COVID took us, but immediately we had all this brand new technology. I mean, we didn't have Microsoft Classroom or Zoom before COVID. As you said earlier on, if you were lucky and you were tech savvy, Skype was it. And now we have this plethora of a range of new technologies. How do we, or how could we then utilise that and make the most out of it and continue to grow the project, not stagnate? And so therefore it was about looking at the successes of our programme in the pilot, but also then carrying that into the new technologies. And the way we did that was to have a look at TV, because these kids were now not in a group, not in a classroom, not 30 together, but we're going to be individually isolated within their own houses. How do we get that child who perhaps doesn't even have a garden, interested and active and doing citizen science and taking on board some of this knowledge, being enthused, being encouraged, and empower them to get outside and do something for their local river. So we looked at TV, we looked at kids programming, and we saw that it's all about the relationship. It's about what that presenter gets across to that individual child down through that screen. And taking that, then we built the river program out of it. So yeah,
I think encourage everyone, if you haven't been on the YouTube site, to see some of the videos.
Please don't. It's quite embarrassing.
Maybe not the one with you in the week.
No.
Enda, can I just finish with you? What has been the legacy for the Tidy Towns group? Has it changed your own understanding of the environment that you're in?
Yes, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Basically, before our Tidy Towns committee hadn't got 2 water officers, right? So we have myself and Leo here, and Leo McMahon, both of us are water officers now for the Tidy Towns group. So that's the first thing. We're also, on a monthly basis, we carry out water testing on our river, so that's continued. And basically, I suppose from a community aspect, making people aware of what's around us, in particular caring for your water. Whereas people, our local kind of source is AB Lough beside us in Emmy Vale. So, a lot of people drinking the water, they don't know where it's coming from, how it's treated and that. So, from a legacy perspective, this has encouraged us, I suppose, as a group, to continue, caring for our environment and, doing litter picks not only on the grass verges, on the roads, etc., but actually in the river itself. Because one of the things we did start was actually we went to the river and started to clean up the river with rubbish and silage wrappers and bottles and cans and all the sorts, you know what I mean? So that was the first thing we did, just cleaned up things, and we continued to do that. Getting into the river and walking up the river and noticing things that are not right and reporting back to the local county council, the environmental section and the fisheries board or whoever it be to help us out. And from it as well, it's encouraging others, I suppose, young people who are involved with schools now, which we had with a youth club in Emmyvale, which we didn't have. So, what Ian was talking about there regarding regarding the education aspect, sharing that kind of videos, on our Facebook page, or sharing it to schools, and trying to get maybe teachers involved in our Tidy Towns, which we have also got a teacher involved now on the Tidy Towns committee. So, there's a lot of positives, And
I did ask, I was chatting to the gentleman before we started, and they were talking about so many positives, and I said, is there any learnings, anything negative? And there isn't.
I suppose the negative is
there isn't at all.
It's finished, just want to continue,
In fact, it's finished. Yeah. I just want to finish with you, Andy. There's always a danger, is there not, with education, that, within schools you can get a really enthusiastic teacher, you can get that head principal who just for some reason has a real interest in water and environment and all the rest. But if they leave, the legacy isn't there, isn't cemented. To what extent can this project, do you think, have a different kind of impact in schools?
No, I think you're right. I think myself and Alan have seen as educators, the last 30 years, that interesting teacher leaves or retires, or even a maternity, that it falls apart some of the environmental work. I think that there is a difference with this. It's that the resources that we have there are available to all the, as many schools as we can throw them out to. We have groups out there that are hosting the river episodes and all the resources. We also have a lot of organisations around the 3 catchments that schools can engage with and carry on doing this rivers work or water quality work with. Where it fits in with if a teacher leaves and how we ensure that continue. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know if there is an answer to that. It's just carrying on. It comes again from a top down. If departments are funding education programs in schools, and the teacher training as a huge element, right the way from university teacher training, and then you'll have more teachers coming out and through the system that have an interest in environmental issues, and then you will have more than one teacher in a school.
Yes.
So I think it comes from very early on when teachers are being trained and right the way through.
And these projects all add to that kind of pressure that's needed to make sure that happens in the long term. Aidan, Enda, Alan and Andy, thank you all so much for coming up, and congratulations on all your efforts. So we're going to jump straight into session 2, ladies and gentlemen, and as we know there are of course multiple pressures on water bodies, not even to begin to talk about the climate crisis that we're in, and it all leads to impact on water quality, a significant challenge to put it mildly, and it requires a massive effort. Restoration isn't just of course about the water body itself as well, it's also about the land surrounding it. So we're going to talk a little bit about water body restoration, and I'm pleased to introduce our next 2 speakers. To start with, we have Dr. Sarah McLean. She's the Head of Science at Lochs Agency, responsible for leading on all of the agency's scientific delivery to provide robust evidence for the management of the Foyle and Carlingford catchments. She's a graduate of Queen's University in Belfast, where she completed her undergrad degree and also zoology, in zoology, and also her PhD on invasive species. Her research interests are in invasive species, applied fishery science and aquatic habitat restoration. So she will talk about water body restoration, and straight afterwards we will be hearing a little bit about catchment interventions. How do we increase a lake's ecological status, and what interventions can be used to remove the pollutants? And we have Phil Jordan, Professor of Catchment Science in the School of Geography and Environmental Science in Ulster University. Phil's teaching and research focuses on the dynamics and fate of pollutants in our river and lake catchments, and also in agri-environmental policy. So I'm delighted to introduce both Sarah and Phil, and afterwards, much like we've just had, we will then have a panel discussion with a great lineup of people. But first, introduce Sarah.
Never been so glad that I did not use a headshot, and didn't ask you to go ahead. I've done that wrong already. Okay, so I'm going to present to you today, well, I'm going to attempt to present to you Work Package 4 Implementation T2. This is the work of multiple partners, and there is no way that I can do justice to the sheer volume of work that was done in this work package in 10-15 minutes. So the partners involved in this package were ourselves at Lochs Agency, Inland Fisheries Ireland, Armagh, Banbridge, Craigavon Council, Ulster University and Donegal County Council. So because of the sheer level of work that was done in this part of the project, I'm going to go high level. So I'm going to try and contextualise it for you to talk about the importance of the work that we're doing and how that can be applied across larger scales than the 3 catchments that we did in CatchmentCARE. But I urge you all to take the opportunity today to talk about the nuances of the project and the detail of the work with the catchment officers that are here today, and to look at the posters and find out about the detail of the work, because there's just no way I'm going to be able to do it justice here. So the water body actions and catchment work centred around improving water quality in the priority areas. And it was focused around water bodies that were failing to achieve good ecological status under the Water Framework Directive. Work Package 4 implemented the actions of the scoping and targeting work which was delivered in Work Package 3, which I definitely don't have time to touch on today, but we can't underestimate the importance of Work Package 3, the importance of prioritising and making sure that work is done on appropriate spatial and temporal scales. So that is probably a huge piece of learning from CatchmentCARE, which we don't maybe have time to go into today, but again, I urge you to speak to particularly colleagues in IFI about that work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how we improve water quality in the river system. So I'm going to talk about in-stream and riparian works and the control of chemical export from land use work. And then I'm going to pass parcel to Professor Phil Jordan from Ulster University, who's going to tell you about the lake work that his team undertook. So as I said, high level, contextual, our water bodies are under extreme pressure from human anthropogenic activities, both now and historically. And largely these pressures can be categorised into these 8 groups. They could be sub-categorised further, but that's kind of where I went to with this. So we have diffuse impacts, so that's pollutants and contaminants which enter the groundwater and surface water through diffuse pathways, things like runoff and rainfall. We have point contamination from fixed identifiable sources, like a farm or a wastewater treatment plant. We have hydrological alterations where humans have change the flow and the patterns and the hydrological regimes. We have abstraction, where we, it's all about humans, remove water from freshwater systems for all the various aspects of our life that we need water for. Barriers, which reduce connectivity for not just animals, but also sediment and nutrient cycling. Physical alterations, so alterations to the channel, to the riparian zone, to the surrounding floodplains for agriculture and urban development, and amongst other things. Non-native species, which lead to things like habitat competition, further habitat alterations, predation and hybridization, and last but not least, the massive elephant in the room that is climate change, leading to changes in increased water temperature, flooding, drought and eutrophication. The thing about these pressures are that they are not mutually exclusive. Pretty much all of them are happening in any given area in a single system all at once. So that means that there's not really a one-size-fits-all solution, because the sheer number of pressures that our freshwater systems are under mean that this is a really multifaceted issue. These pressures cause changes in the state of our freshwater systems and lead to a whole host of further impacts, such as biodiversity loss and reductions in water quality, which is where CatchmentCARE comes in. So with all of these pressures recognised, we understand that in order to improve water quality, which is the aim of CatchmentCARE, we need to work towards restoring our water bodies to as close to their natural state as is possible. So when we talk about restoration in this context, we mean the re-establishment of the natural functions of the water body related to the physical, chemical and biological processes, and really importantly, the linkages between terrestrial and aquatic systems. So we're aiming to repair the diversity and the dynamics of our aquatic systems in order to ensure that the natural ecosystem processes are operating efficiently. This process needs to be robust, it needs to be long-term, and it needs to build resilience back into our systems so that they can cope with all of the various pressures that we put them under. Sometimes it's possible to remove pressure altogether, and more often than not, what we have to do is try and mitigate against them as best we possibly can. The first of the restoration techniques employed by CatchmentCARE in the Finn, the Arnie and the Blackwater catchments was in-stream restoration. So this is work that aims to restore the biotic and abiotic elements of the river itself. So we're aiming to use ecosystem-based approaches to restore the habitat by reducing the flow, creating more dynamic habitats, where natural complexity has been degraded, linking up systems where human activities such as dam building and changes to the system have reduced connectivity. We want to be reducing the impact of erosion where it is unnatural, and that's important because erosion is a natural process, but where it is unnatural, we wanted to kind of mitigate against that. And encouraging sediment trapping. So in CatchmentCARE, we tried to employ what we were terming green engineering solutions. So we were favouring the implementation of nature-based solutions. This approach was designed to improve the longevity of the work that we were doing, because we're building in natural resilience. We're trying to make the river behave as it should be if humans weren't applying all of these pressures to it. And quite importantly, the work that we're doing is consistent with the Global Sustainability Development Goals, and I think it's important to contextualise it in that manner. So, like I said, whistle-stop tour. In CatchmentCARE, we delivered 130 in-stream works across the catchments, the 3 catchments. This work included the removal of 2 major barriers to fish migration, pinning of woody material at 28 sites, well over 80 kilometres of barrier creation and bank stabilisation, as well as a huge array of other techniques at multiple sites, including the installation of willow weed walls, gravel cleaning, rubble mat installation, creation of meander complexes, pools and riffles. Basically, it's a huge amount of work, which required, as I said, significant prioritisation, baselining, planning, permissions, design, consent, construction and evaluation. So not something that we can address in one slide, so please do speak to the catchment officers on the ground and they will tell you about all of our woes and all of the way we got over it. As we discussed earlier, river restoration required us not only to look at the river itself, but the linkages between the land use and the river, so the linkages between aquatic and terrestrial habitats. With that in mind, the riparian restoration was a major part of the focus on this project. For all 3 catchments, the major pressures, if you look at terrestrial and aquatic linkages, come from agricultural interactions, as it is the case pretty much everywhere on the island of Ireland. So riparian restoration is of very key importance. Riparian restoration is largely focused on creating buffers between land use and rivers so that we don't go land river. You know, we have a gap in between that's allowed to act as a natural habitat. So this involves using fencing to keep livestock out of the river, creating wildlife corridors along the riverbank. Tree planting is also a huge part of this work. Planting of deciduous broadleaf trees provides an array of benefits to our rivers. We should have deciduous broadleaf trees along our rivers. It's land use, it's humans that have removed them. Trees provide so many benefits to the sort of land-river interface. They provide structural integrity, they shade the river, they act as a buffer to land runoff. They provide vital nutrients to the lower trophic levels in the river itself through leaf litter drops and branch drops. The creation of fencing and buffer strips, so while it removes the impact of livestock poaching and trampling in the riverbed, it does pose a problem for landowners in that it removes what they use as their source sometimes for water for their livestock. So as a result, the riparian restoration work also included the provision of offline drinking solutions such as solar pump supplied troughs. And again, landowners still need access to the riparian buffer strips, so there was a lot of work went into the installation of stiles and gates. So it's a really important part of this work. Again, this is one slide to represent 5 years worth of work, so please do talk to the teams on the ground. In CatchmentCARE, we created nearly 100 kilometres of new riparian buffer strip across the 3 catchments, which is not to be sniffed at. We also installed hundreds of gates, over 450 offline drinking solutions, and the project is also responsible for, and I kind of want to pause because this is I think this is a huge achievement for the project, planting well over 30,000 native broadleaf trees across the 3 catchments. And we all know in the light of climate change that that's a huge achievement. So that was a sort of tour through in-stream and riparian. The other element to this work on our rivers was looking at the chemical export issue, and this work is focused solely on the Finn. So in the Finn catchment, we had a number of sites that are failing to meet good ecological status under Water Framework Directive as a result of poor macroinvertebrate EQR scores, ecological quality ratio scores. CatchmentCARE aimed to address this by looking at the chemical export from land uses, and which were considered to be a likely contributor to this issue. Chemical export from land use can impact both surface and groundwaters and has significant impacts on the ecosystem conservation as well as human health. Chemical export has a number of potential impacts for the receiving water body, including macroinvertebrate mortality, fish mortality, ecosystem collapse, and behavioural changes, so not a minor pressure. In the Finn, at the beginning of the project, we were considering 2 major sources of chemical export, sheep dipping and forestry practices. That from the outset, that's what we considered to be the 2 major pressures. So the team started investigating this issue. They undertook a massive literature review into the herbicide and pesticide chemicals used by these practices, and they then set about trying to quantify the likely impact of these practices by mapping input across the catchment. So this baselining found that acetamiprid, cypermethrin, organophosphates, as well as MCPA were the most likely chemicals contributing to chemical export in the Finn. And this baselining work also really interestingly taught us something. Whilst at the beginning we considered forestry to have historically been a major contributing factor, new forestry practices have caught up with this issue. And a lot of the issues that we were concerned about were already being addressed by the forestry bodies in their new practices. So from that point onwards, the CatchmentCARE team focused on trying to reduce the impact of the sheep dipping practices in the area we're having. Much of the mitigation work was based around awareness raising and education. So the team worked really closely with the farming community. They completed questionnaires, they went to the marts, they produced infographics and advisory sheets, as well as a really good educational video. This work was really successful, and that is in no small part thanks to the relationship building between the project and the farming community in the Finn. It just would not have been possible if we hadn't had the buy-in. The Lochs Agency CatchmentCARE team also used novel techniques to detect and quantify the presence of herbicides and pesticides in the water bodies in the Finn catchment. This is done using a pretty nifty new piece of work, an integrated system of passive samplers, which we were able to deploy at 5 sites across the Finn and leave them to detect herbicides and pesticides in the water over time. So we did this for a 12-month period. Again, I would love to spend the next 40 minutes going through the results with you, so please make sure you talk to Kelsey and Sean from Lots Agency about this work. But essentially this system gave us the ability to detect herbicides and pesticides across the system as they were happening in real time, which was massive. The last part of the chemical expert work was Lots Agency and Donegal County Council have also installed 3 integrated constructed wetlands. So these ICWs effectively act as huge filters. They trap chemicals from the publicly used sheep dipping facilities and filter them out before they reach the river. This is another exemplar project where CatchmentCARE are using nature-based solutions to address catchment pressures. So that sort of does and doesn't conclude the work that was undertaken in this work package, aiming to improve water quality in the rivers. What I'm now going to do is pass you to Phil, who is going to present the work delivered in Work Package 4 on improving ecological status of lakes.
Thank you, and I'm presenting for my colleagues here, Juan and Julie, Pete Devlin, Richard Douglas, Clara and Professor Brian Rippey, who's retired, but whose idea this was. Really. The background to this is that lakes, they can become eutrophic and stay eutrophic over time, and I guess the best way to solve that eutrophication is to stop external loads. And we found that over the years, the dynamics of lakes, that if you stop the external loads, or if you propose to stop the external loads, the lake sediments themselves are so loaded with sediment that they can actually start to release that sediment, phosphorus from the sediment. And that can continue for a number of years. So we know from our larger lakes, Loch Ness, Loch Erne, Sheelin and the likes, that the models and predictions for that eutrophication can continue for maybe 30 or 40 years. So what the group decided to do, a radical solution, was to look at the feasibility and also the transferability of dosing the lakes with chemical salts, small lakes, to rapidly improve water quality and particularly to halt that internal loading process of phosphorus coming from the sediments. And that transferability is important because such small lakes, a real feature of especially the border area counties. There are well over 1,000 in Northern Ireland alone, and those interdrumlin lakes, they stretch from county down to County Mayo. You can see from this EPA map that many of those small lakes are at poor or bad water quality, eutrophication. Because of the nature of the environment, they're linked to agricultural runoff pathways of phosphorus. So the 3 lakes chosen for this amendment were in County Monaghan, and there was a long scoping exercise. And this scoping exercise was also impacted by COVID. So lake suitability is not suitable for every single lake, and the team will be able to tell you about those parameters for lake suitability. There's also dose type and quantity, so what would you dose the lakes with, and how much will you put in there from the literature. And then what ecotoxicology might there be if you dose the lake with a chemical salt to take out chlorophyll and phosphorus. Planning permission took a long time, so all the agencies involved, Irish Fisheries Island, particularly cautious, Inland Fisheries Island, particularly cautious about dosing natural lakes with chemical salts. So that's their remit to be cautious. That took a long time. And then there were pre-dose surveys. So, as I said, radically, this is what the team did. They took tanks of aluminium sulfate, which is chemical salt used to treat our drinking water, and they got it into a tank in a boat, and they went up and down the lake and dosed the lake at a constant rate at a dose of 1 milligram per litre of aluminium sulfate. And that was a dose through the water column. There are two ways of doing this. through the water column or actually directly onto the sediment. But it's the water column that we got permission for at a dose rate of 1 milligram per litre. And there's another picture now shot in a bit more detail. You can see the aluminium sulfate spreading out through the water column and then just precipitating out to the sediment. So I suppose that the main impact we're looking for was changes in chlorophyll A. That's the ecological impact, the biological impact. Changes in chlorophyll A, but not increase in the aluminium above background rates. So I've got data here from the team from one of the lakes, Grove Loch, for chlorophyll A. And this is over a tight time scale over the x-axis, but also interrupted by the COVID lockdowns. Chlorophyll A concentration on the y-axis there. You can see the dose day in the red dashed line. And so immediately after the dose day, the chlorophyll A crashes. But that's during a winter period anyway, and what we need to show, or needed to show, was that chlorophyll A was suppressed during the following growth period, which is the summer into autumn. We also show from that tight time period that aluminium concentrations, well, there was a blip on dose day, but the concentrations didn't really get above background levels. So that's good. Increase the time scale, and you can see on the right-hand part of the x-axis, we're moving into the summer period, and chlorophyll A does actually stay low for that period. And the aluminium, well, there's a blip there as well, but overall the aluminium stays low. So that looks quite good. And similar results from the other two catchments. Grove is quite specific. So in terms of a summary of that work, and again this is high level, for a few minutes, there's a poster at the back, and all the team are here to answer all your deadly questions about this kind of technique. Transferability. Well, there are hundreds, well over 1,000 small lakes in the Irish Border region. Not all suitable, but many are for this kind of rapid intervention if it's considered to be worth doing. In terms of the water quality, well, there are observed declines in chlorophyll A. At face value, for the data we have, the median concentration of chlorophyll A was actually halved. But there are caveats. And the caveats that I can think about there is the longevity of that chlorophyll A crash. How long does it last for the 1 milligram per litre dose the team put in there? What would the effects of a higher dose be, which the team would have liked to have done? 10 milligrams, for example, which is more akin to the doses that other countries use in their lake systems. And the other caveat is that there was one dosing method used, and that was the dose through the water column rather than onto the sediment surface. So that's all experimental, and that's something that could be done in the future. So the legacy is, well, there are a lot of unknowns, if you like, at the start of this, particularly with planning permissions and getting that right before, particularly IFI were happy with the dosing plans. So all that's done now, all those planning barriers are done, and the practicalities of actually dosing these small lakes with a very cheap substance that's used every day in our drinking water process, that's all now written up into a kind of a manual. So that's the end of the water body actions section. I'm going to go straight on into the catchments interventions actions as part of the same theme, ecosystems action. And this work, the monitoring work, was principally done by Gabriel Gaffney, who's gone on from CatchmentCARE to work with Mayo County Council, and Chris Johnson from AFBI, Con from Donegal County Council, and Clara Murray keeps us all in order with all the accountancy for the administration for the project. Now, in terms of phosphorus, it's that wicked nutrient that we can't do without, but small amounts lost from the environment cause a problem in fresh water. And just scaling it down to the two principal sources, point and diffuse source, leading to eutrophication, I guess what we wanted to do was try to break that connection using the terminology by using short rotation coppice willow as a nature-based solution. So we wanted to do this in small wastewater treatment works, so somewhere plants that sit between septic systems for single domestic houses and very large urban wastewater treatment plants. There's another class which is small rural wastewater treatment plants that serve between 10 and hundreds of people depending on their size. and their effluent can be of variable quality. Sometimes it can be very, very poor secondary effluent. Sometimes it can be treated to quite high degrees of particulates, but phosphorus is always present. Phosphorus is always present, either a soluble nutrient or a particulate nutrient. So this is a map of the island of Ireland at both jurisdictions showing all rural wastewater treatment plants less than 500 population equivalents. So there are a lot of them around, so that excludes all the large urban centres, and they're pretty well spread out over the landscape. So we reviewed the state of the knowledge to see what polishing options there could be in terms of taking care of effluent from these rural systems. If the effluent was poor, could we improve it somehow? So there's lots of technologies out there, and of course nature-based solutions by their nature are very, very inexpensive. We wanted to update water quality data from 2 established systems as well, that were done as part of a previous Interreg project, where water quality data hadn't been collected, to see what the effects have been after many years of establishment. And the third one was we wanted to install 2 new short rotation coppice systems and assess their performance on water quality. We wanted to make a change in water quality. So the 4 systems that we looked at, the 2 existing ones were Bridgend with a population equivalent of 260, Drumkey with 17. And we monitored water quality coming in a stream reach coming into the Woolwich treatment plant and stream water quality coming out. That's biological and chemical. We found for Bridgend, which was the largest, that the good water quality coming into the stream reach before the willow plantation was unaffected as it left. So all the irrigation, which would previously come into the stream system, all the irrigation of the willow was attenuating that phosphorus and not causing any chemical pressure or biological impact downstream. So that's good news. In Drumkey, the system had been turned off for harvesting. So it had reverted back to how it used to be. So we actually picked up that. It was poorer water quality downstream of the willow plant. So for the 2 new sites, we actually introduced a way of sampling which picked up the dynamics, the use of these small wastewater treatment plants during the day from midnight to midnight. So we're taking a water sample every hour over a 24-hour period. During periods of time when there'd been no rainfall, so we're just picking up just the effects of the wastewater treatment plant. We use that as our primary way of finding out whether these things are, well, scoping for baseline, but also finding out whether they'd worked. And I'm just going to concentrate on the grow because we've got the data for this to show you. And you can see just by the way that is situated that we had a wastewater treatment plant in a small development. The effluent was going into the stream system, first order stream system. We monitored upstream and we monitored downstream. We took a sample every hour over a 24-hour period. We did that once per month during periods where there'd been no rainfall for 3 days. And then we diverted that effluent into a new irrigation field. So the irrigation field was upstream, close to the upstream sampling point, so we might have anticipated there could be some leakage there to affect the upstream sample point. This is what we found. So each one of those box whisker plots is 24 hours of data showing the variations. The red ones really show, especially during the summer period when the assimilation capacity of the river diminishes, the red ones show the variation of phosphorus over a 24-hour period, and that's because people are using their loos and their wastewater systems. So it tends to be high in the morning and high in the evening and lower in between. So the upstream, where there's no wastewater input, is always lower with less variation. But there's still clearly an issue there in the summer at the upstream sites. There's a lot of phosphorus in the system coming from somewhere else. But the downstream site really picks up the wastewater treatment plant. So what we'd be looking for after irrigation would be a reduction in the variation in the red boxes, but also for quantification to match the concentration on the upstream sites. And, bang, we got a 95 to 100% improvement straight away in the months of May and June. The variation disappeared and the concentrations matched the upstream concentrations. Now what happened during July and August is that the plant was switched off. So it reverted back to how it was before. Now, for some reason with the animation, the last data point of September has not come up, but it matches the May and June concentration, so we're back to normal. So what we've done by using a nature-based solution is we've improved water quality at this site by between 95% and 100%. So the second area is diffuse pollution, and this was an experiment done at Hillsborough where a stream reach and a hill slope was planted with willow. A stream reach is a buffer strip, and the willow and the hill slope as an experimental site. There it is on an oblique view, showing those willow sites outlined in red, with the grass plots as well. So we measured the difference there, or Chris's team measured the difference, and then the upstream and downstream. So the results here for the hill slope show that over a 5-year period, now this is not as definitive as the wastewater treatment plant data, but it's still nonetheless encouraging. The willow plots retained about 40% less than the grass plots of phosphorus. So they're like 40% less through, that's right. So they clearly are having an effect at the hill slope scale. Again, less definitive at the reach scale, but what we can say is after establishment, 2018-19, the willow buffer strip was only adding a small increment of phosphorus to that reach over the period. And the reason that there's an issue there is that the upstream site outside the willow zone was actually importing a lot of phosphorus to start with. So that's a difficult experiment to try to resolve. It's only adding a small increment, and so it's very encouraging. I'll finish off by saying that we've got a nature-based solution here for point and diffuse pollution. It's a targeted measure. It can be put in the right place as well. It offers multiple ecosystem services benefits. On the left-hand side there, you can see that the 5 big soil land use ecosystem services benefits are water purification. Yes, sorted that one with the willow. Carbon sequestration. Well, it's growing wood, so yes, it's done that. Nutrient cycling is the other one. We've recycled nutrients to land instead of it going into the river, so yes, we've done that. Biodiversity, these are mixed species of willow on a single site, so there's a biodiversity angle there as well. And of course, it's primary production. It's growing fibre that can be used for biofuel. So these kind of systems, for point sources at least, we're talking about up to 100% water quality improvement. That's a no-brainer. And then the willow is giving us all 5 ecosystem services benefits. So I'll finish there. One last slide. Sorry, this is on the legacy of the whole ecosystems action section, and I guess this whole program with the rivers, the lakes, and the willows this ecosystems actions. It's a very large cross-border body of work, and of course, knowledge exchange is clearly important, and this should reach all communities and all stakeholders. And it continues through school engagement. You've seen Chris, Andy's work. Augmented reality, virtual reality, and the demonstrations of that here today. CatchmentCARE storyboards, which are online, and scientific publications, which are now coming out as well, so it reaches all those levels. And at an operational level, the work by all the partners on this part of the project continues to monitor these effects, so that has to go on for the benefit of the measures and to promote the transferability to other new projects. I'm thinking particularly about East Plus. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Sarah, so much for that. Really, really fascinating. We're running a bit behind, but we will try and catch up. I want to introduce our panellists next. 4 people. Dr. Marcus Malley. When you hear your name, maybe you can just come up and sit down. Marcus is a biodiversity manager for Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon Borough Council. Dr. Ciara O'Leary from Inland Fisheries Ireland, Senior Research Officer there. Chris Johnson, Principal Scientific Officer with Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute. And Dr. Richard Douglas from the School of Geography and Environmental Sciences in Ulster University. Thank you all so much. You're all very welcome. I must say it's also very heartening. Phil ended his presentation with legacies, but also to hear a scientist talk about the importance of outreach and you know, reaching out into the public in terms of communicating the findings of what the scientific community has found. It's a really important thing. Ciara, can I start with you, please? You know, we heard from Sarah about the, I suppose it's kind of a process question, but about the importance of scoping and that sort of approach. Can you talk a little bit about that in the context of the project itself?
Yeah, absolutely. You'll see at the posters at the back, we've got all our deliverables, but none of our deliverables capture the fact that it took 2 years before we could start to do any restoration works, because we had to go into these 3 catchments and find out, well, what is going wrong? What are the pressures in here? What is the water quality? What is the fish status? And look at the barriers in the catch, do barrier assessments, and look at the rats, so it's the habitat assessment. So before we could do any work, we had to go in and evaluate what's going on and actually document the baseline so that when we do go in and do measures, that we can evaluate the pre and post, so that we know for sure that the measures we chose are having a positive impact on the environment. And so that took 2 years, which was a bit longer, I think, than we had initially anticipated. And it eats into our program. This was a 5-year program. We would love to be doing multiple years post monitoring, and obviously time has run out for us, but it's something that we need to continue to monitor the long-term effects, especially with nature-based solutions, which are a bit more passive and take a bit longer before you're actually going to see the real benefits to the environment. So again, it's something we have to look at in the future is timescales for these things. You know, 5 years is long for some people, but not in terms of environmental
In terms of
change.
nature, it's nothing. Yeah, it's nothing. And just on that point then, I mean, what are your reflections now, having gone through that process? How can it, if this to be replicated again, would you do something differently, or have you learned a lot from being involved in it?
Oh, I think we would do the same thing again. I think that it is becoming best practice to really go down and evaluate what's going on upstream and downstream. You can't go into a catchment and say we're going to do some works in this tiny little section without taking the full picture into account. So I know Lots Agency and ourselves and IFI have created processes now, so we're going to continue to do this scoping exercise and the documentation, which is important because people move on, staff leave, and you need that legacy of what was done in that catchment in 5-10 years time when we're seeing a real benefit. You need to remember what was done there and what worked and what didn't work, more importantly.
And Marcus over here, sorry Marcus. Marcus, what was interesting I found from the talks there was both in terms of what Sarah was talking about and trying to get back to the more natural way, sort of rehabilitating streams and rivers to do what they do naturally, and then Phil talking about nature-based solutions. The role, I mean, it's an obvious thing to ask you, but the role that nature plays in providing the answers for all of these questions.
Exactly. We're trying to use natural based solutions all the time. We're trying to do that in 2 ways, mainly in 2 ways. We're trying, first of all, to use biodiversity to protect the riparian area. We're creating these buffer strips. We're planting them out with trees. In the Blackwater, I think we planted over 30,000 trees in the period of the project. And so we're using that vegetation to trap a lot of the nutrients, to soak a lot of the nutrients up. And the byproduct is that we help to keep the animals out of the river. That stops a lot of the erosion, a lot of the disturbance of the riverbed. And then similarly in the rivers, we're using woody debris and a variety of different nature-based solutions to try and protect our banks, to try and let the rivers flow more naturally, and to improve the biodiversity of the riverbed.
And these kind of initiatives, these kind of projects, CatchmentCARE, how much is it changing the language of what councils are intending to do with all of those kind of projects? It's not only, I mean, it's immense, 30,000 trees to be planted, but looking at nature-based solutions, the assumption that really is the best way forward from now on.
My job, as well as trying to deliver biodiversity, is to add value to our council area. And water quality is of vital importance, as is biodiversity, trying to improve our borough. And I'll give you one example of how, and people don't appreciate now that there's a great interest in nature. We sent out we send out a document to all our householders asking them to comment on what bits of our services they rate most highly. And you might believe this, but biodiversity rates higher than leisure centres, than play parks, than community halls. So it is really high up in the list of priorities that the public and hence our councillors are interested in.
Chris, can I ask about the legacy of this project for your institute? I mean, your sense, I mean, again, reflecting on what has just been said, this idea that in many ways we're going from simplicities, the kind of engineering solutions of the past, to complexity, which is what nature is. It's a complex organism. But these are the kind of solutions that we're looking for.
Yeah, I actually twisted with it. I think we're going from what we want to try to develop nature-based solutions, and I've mentioned there, and it's still described. These are very simple solutions. They're very straightforward. We are reliant at the moment when we talk about water quality, we're talking about concrete, we're talking about tanks, pumps, pipes, valves. There's a lot to go wrong. There's a lot of embedded carbon in there as well. So what we're trying to investigate here are ways that we can actually deal with diffuse runoff, point source runoff from commercial, industry, agri-food, domestic properties, in order to try to develop a kind of a biomass product, a solution, if you like, which can go forward, you can draw down greenhouse gases, provide carbon resources. With net zero 2050 coming up, to go slightly further ahead there, we have to get these carbon resources from somewhere else. We cannot be reliant on getting them from oil and coal and gas and whatever else. So, we do see that we have a potential opportunity now to really feed into this gap that certainly we have. So it's the perfect time to introduce those kind of nature-based solutions. And I would encourage you to look at the posters back there that Phil mentioned, because they show the simplicity. It's just a mindset shift to try to say, look, we can let nature do this. Nature's done it very well for thousands and thousands of years. Let's rely on nature to do it again for all benefit.
And Richard, I suppose the one thing that nature needs is time, above and beyond anything else, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose tying that into the work that we did with the phosphorus remediation, I'm an environmental scientist, and adding a chemical to a lake didn't sit easy with me to do, but having worked in Loughnane from the mid-90s, the water quality of Loughnane has decreased, it's got further nutrient enrichment. And that's kind of reflected in our lakes. And we have done everything, and everybody in this room, not people in this room, have tried their best, and all the various initiatives in decreasing the nutrient inputs to our lakes. But so much has entered there, there's so much in that setup, and even with that decrease that we're doing, we're still getting, they're still getting worse in certain circumstances. So it was interesting to, this technique that we used, adding elements. We've done once before when I went to Ireland. Bob Foy did it back in 1985 from Pyclock. We added alum and it precipitates and keeps those nutrients out of the water quality almost instantly. The next day in our data, phosphorus, chlorophyll A was more or less out of the water column. So yeah, that seems an amazing fix, but of course we have to decrease the inputs to start with. But there is certain circumstances that this sort of technique, we went through, Julie, myself and Juan and the team, we went through lots of hurdles to do that work, to add the chemicals. And we're going to continue the monitoring plan as PhD sponsored by Ulster University, because it's very important to really see what the long term is. From the literature, we know this is not a long term fix. In 5 years' time, definitely those lakes will be back to where they were if the nutrients continue to input. And because the dose we put on was quite low, we didn't see the sediment. So in the United States, they put in very high doses, and they actually seal up that sediment. So all that sin from the last 100 years is sealed in and doesn't come back into the water column. So we just felt our way into this, and hopefully the work, last summer we saw chlorophyll A was down, phosphorus was down. We'll see what happens this year. But we've demonstrated that the technique is possible. It cannot be used in every lake. It has to be of a certain alkalinity, because again, we were careful making sure if your lake did not have a high enough alkalinity, the water column will get very acidic and then that aluminium will become bioavailable. You know, we have clearly shown that, you know, aluminium is down low, there is no issues. And we had trouble finding suitable lakes with that aluminium to start with. So we had a lot of hurdles, and you can see it does take time.
There's an element of sort of crossing your fingers and hoping. To what extent do you think it is I mean, it's interesting you say it's not a long-term solution as long as the phosphorus is going in.
That's correct.
It's, you know.
Yeah, no, and I think we all know that. So you know, this phosphorus remediation technique has its uses. You know, it's used on, you know, leisure facilities, you know, ponds, golf courses, those sorts. Smaller scale, you're not going to do something big with this. And really, if you want to make your lake clear for the long term, you've got to stop the inputs. But there's a lot of sediment in there, and, you know, Julie's work with Brian Rippey, you know, you're looking at, even if you stopped all the inputs to some of our lakes, it'll be 50 years before that sediment is not releasing phosphorus back up into that water column. So it's a very complicated story. But I think what we did, and I think what we're proud of, what Julie and Brian, we've been able to implement a different technique. You know, we had launch boats, sizable boats and small lakes with no slipways, put half a ton of chemical into a small boat, dose it, you know, to very acidic. You know, so we've shown that we can do it.
And being cautious is a good thing. Just finally, did anyone ask what you were doing? Were the local people interested?
Yes, there was quite a bit of interest.
And their faces when you described what you were doing?
Yeah, a few difficult conversations, and also with lots of the agencies. The agents were going, really, you know. But it has been done a lot in other countries. Germany, you know, Scandinavia, New Zealand, US, it's been done a lot.
Finally, can I just ask you, Ciara, stepping back from it all, the IFI's involvement in this CatchmentCARE, can you give a sense of your impressions of the last 5 years and the kind of legacy it'll leave for you?
I think for us, the opportunity to come in and work in the Arnie catchment allowed us, we've done a lot of river restoration work over the years, but the scale that we've been working on has always been smaller sections. This gave us an opportunity to go in and look at a whole catchment, and you know, we were able to fence 20 kilometres of channel and deal with a lot of landowners that we normally wouldn't be able to deal with the funding, I suppose, that we've had in the past. So it was actually being able to go in and demonstrate that at this scale we can go in with some very simple measures like fencing and planting, and spend the time. And we got some really nice equipment out of the CatchmentCARE budget that we could show a lot of the, you know, the detail, you know, that you're going to see changes in substrate, you're going to see changes in the diversity of the water flow. I mean, you need equipment to monitor all that, and we were able to do that with this project. And so it's that legacy that we can now go and show people this works, and here's the evidence of that.
And that important building of relationships on the ground can't be underestimated.
Absolutely. I think people mentioned it earlier, the catchment officers were a vital part of this project, having people in the community, talking to people day in, day out, and just building up that relationship. And you can see it from the first project to the last project. The community were talking, you know, people who were a bit nervous at the start of the second project, they were coming to us going, we would like to be involved.
Yes.
And you know, it's just that the community really got on board.
Super. As has been said, the scientists are here, and we'll have time after lunch or during lunch for you to speak to them and have a look at the abstracts at the back. Marcus, Ciara, Chris and Richard, thank you all so much indeed for those comments. So we'll speed on to the last session. The final session is about building resilience. Of course, it is community actions for resilient ecosystems. And our first speaker is Dr. Donncha Dooley to talk about providing a legacy for policy. Donncha is the former head of the Agri-Environment branch in the Agri-Food Bioscience Institute, and he has nearly 2 decades experience working on land use and its impact on aquatic ecosystems. And as part of his role, he oversaw their contribution to the CatchmentCARE project. I'm delighted to introduce Donncha.
Thank you, Ella. It's great to be here today after 5 years of work on CatchmentCARE. I hit the wrong button. Okay, here we go. So listen, like all the other presenters, I'm trying to sum up 5 years' work in 10 minutes, and it's pretty hard to do. and it's the work of a lot of people in AFBI, and I just want to acknowledge those people and that put a significant amount of work and are still working on finding this project as we speak. The AFBI work was very much focused on kind of project legacy and policy and tools and evidence base that we could provide after the project. I suppose the initial kind of science focus for us was around phosphorus and specifically around achieving the targets of the Water Framework Directive, which is a big challenge. And we were particularly interested in around the technical feasibility of achieving those targets and also the economic impact of achieving those targets. Just to focus in for one moment on the economic impacts, was that's very often been looked at from a cost-benefit analysis perspective, and that was the approach that we took in the Source Tap project, which was led by NI Water, and that report is available on the Source Tap website. But in this particular case, we looked at it from a different perspective. We looked at it from a perspective of affordability, which is a different way of looking at it, and looking at, and in particular, we were interested in affordability for agriculture in achieving the targets of the Water Framework Directive. But today, I'm not going to focus on the kind of science side of it. I'm just going to focus on the tools and the evidence base that we've developed through the 5 years and how that can be fed into policy. In particular, the Water Framework Directive, but the nutrient action programs as well, north and south of the report. So there was a number of different tools and evidence that has been developed, and the AFBI work kind of worked at catchment scale, sub-catchment scale, and farm scale. And at catchment scale, there was a lot of modelling work done by my colleague Russell Adams, and looking at applying the SLAM model and the CRAFT model. And I'll come back to the SLAM model, but CRAFT models in particular is relevant for looking at mitigation measures at catchment scale. And then my colleague Erin Sherry was involved in developing up a farm economic model, which I'll talk about. And then we also looked at farmyard assessments. In terms of evidence base, we kind of looked at the load reductions that are required for the Water Framework Directive to achieve those targets, improving nutrient management, how do we mitigate with willow, and also affordability related to the Water Framework Directive. So I won't be able to go through all of those, but just to pick out a few of them. The SLAM model is an EPA model and was developed by the EPA some years ago. And I think it's fair to say that to the best of our knowledge, there is no All-Ireland source apportionment tool being applied. And that's really required for these cross-border catchments. We need to have one common tool on the whole of the island if we're going to identify where the sources are and how we mitigate those sources over time. So what Russell did was he applied the EPA SLAM model, he adapted it for Northern Ireland, and he adapted it for the slightly different data sets and the conditions, and he applied it to the Blackwater catchment, and that graph there you see on the left hand side there is shows the different sources of phosphorus in the Blackwater catchment, and the red areas are dominated by diffuse sources, and the other colours there, the light and the orange and the black are different variations of point source contributions. But the key thing here is that the NIEA then were able to take that model and apply it for the river-based management plan, and apply it for the whole of Northern Ireland. Now that's a starting point, and I know the EPA down south are updating that SLAM model, but I suppose it's a lesson of that we do need to develop these models on an all-Ireland basis. Hopefully there'll be further discussions going forward on how that can be done. One of the kind of limitations sometimes with source apportionment is around it does a very good job of kind of breaking it down on a sectoral basis, the sources down on a sectoral basis, but it doesn't really break it down on within the sectors. And within farms, you have within agriculture you have a lot of different sources. The main sources being the farmyard itself, the soil and what the soil is contributed, and also what's coming from manure and slurry and so forth. So what we tried to do here was try to identify in a little bit more detail what were the risks and what were the causes of nutrient loss from farmyards. This was work that was started by Sarah Vera before she left us, and then continued by myself and others in AFBI. And what we tried to do was using an expert survey. It's very difficult to get kind of weighting factors for what sources are causing the biggest risk. So Sarah used an expert survey to identify where are the biggest risks and why from farmyards. And then we applied a survey across about 50 or 60 farms in the catchments, and collecting as much data as possible. And what that allowed us to do was develop up these sort of graphs here, and these are fictitious farmyards. But they allow you to kind of identify which farmyards have the highest risk for nutrient loss, but also where that nutrient loss, what's causing that nutrient loss to happen. And it helps target your mitigation measures even more finer detail. And in this case, in Farm A, you'll be looking at addressing the connectivity between that farmyard and the river body, the river water body, and in Farmyard B, you'll be looking at dealing with the management issues. The management isn't really up to scratch, so we need to improve that. So it helps you to target those mitigation measures. So the work Suzanne Higgins was took forward was in relation to re-evaluating current nutrient management advice to farmers. And it's fair to say that the majority of the kind of focus of our work has always been on, a lot of the research and a lot of the advice is around high intensity farms. Those farms that are pushing the kind of, pushing to increase yields, pushing it, putting in increased inputs into their farms. But the majority of farms on the island of Ireland are not very intensive, and they are kind of underlooked. They're overlooked in some ways in terms of nutrient management. And those farms have low inputs. They're very often just aiming for kind of yields of maybe 4 to 8 tons per dry matter per hectare. And those farms, we kind of targeted those farms because we felt there was some easy wins that we could help improve nutrient management in those farms. And that was proven correct in terms of when we did a survey of fields on some of these farms. Out of 400 fields, over 60% of those fields had soil P values above what's required for agriculture. So those soils are causing a significant risk to water quality. And those, and again, to reiterate, those are low intensity farms. You're talking about maybe 1.4, 1.6 livestock units per hectare, so they're not very intensive, and some of them are even lower than that. So we wanted to look at how we can improve nutrient management on those farms, and if we could do that without impacting on productivity. So Suzanne's work was focused on two things, and it was firstly focused on trying to reduce the amount of nutrients going into the farm, being used in the farm. And a lot of these farms are working at a kind of farm P surplus, at the farm gate P surplus of about 6.2 kilograms of P surplus every year. And through the 3-year process, just through a bit of advice to farmers and help to farmers, we were able to push down that farm P surplus down to about 3.7. And over time, you might be able to get that a little bit lower as well with these farms. Suzanne also looked at the kind of doing agronomic trials, and the current fertilizer advice would recommend farmers be aiming for about index 2 Olsen P. Now, just to clarify, we use index 2 Olsen P in Northern Ireland. Down south it's Morgan's P, and there's a paper there by Sarah Barrow making a comparison between those two, so these results are transferable across border. But in these farms, in the agronomic trial that Suzanne was working on, she put much lower fertilizer inputs into these plots, and she found that at the lower end of index 2 and also at index 1, these fields were producing enough herbage for the stocking densities that the farmer had. They were still aiming for about 6 to 8 tons of dry matter per hectare, which is pretty decent for these farms. And they were able to achieve that at index 1 in some of these farms with low P inputs. So that means there's low fertilizer going into the farms. There's they're redistributing the manure more evenly between fields, and over time you'll get a decrease in soil P. And if you're decreasing soil P, you're decreasing losses to water. So there's a win-win situation there. Now, you've seen this graph already, because for some reason Chris Johnson was able to get both myself and Phil to put Willow into this presentation. So I'm not going to hang around with this one. But just to say that it is important, and Phil has talked about the data already, but it is important. We need to look at the soil P is going to decline very slowly over time. So transport mitigation is crucial for addressing these sort of issues, and Willow is one option, and there's other options in terms of trying to reduce the losses to water while we try to reduce the soil P values down to something that's more sustainable. So this is the farm model. It's a model developed by Aaron Sherry and Aspie, and it's a farm optimization model. And what this farm allows you to do, it allows you to maximize gross margins on the farm. So how do you get the profit up as high as you can, or else how do you minimize the nutrient surplus on that farm? And it allows you to look at different mitigation measures and the impact that will have on gross margins on the farm. And again, this is developed up for beef farms, because linking in with Suzanne's work, but it also could be applied for dairy farms, and also be expanded out to look at nitrogen as well. In this particular case here, Aaron is looking at repairing buffer strips, and what you're looking at is on the x-axis you have livestock density, on the y-axis you have gross margins for that farm. And the bars, in the different colour bars that you're looking at are different percentage of land going into buffer strips. And it goes from 1% up to 5% of the land going to buffer strips. And what it shows, the kind of take-home message here, is that up to 1.4 livestock units per hectare, there is no impact of having a buffer strip. It doesn't impact on farmers' gross margins by having a buffer strip in there of up to 5%. However, at 1.4 livestock units per hectare and going up to 1.5, 1.6, you are increasingly having an impact on the farmers' gross margins. And that's pretty straightforward, it's pretty simple. Why that's happening is that you're taking more land out of production in terms of herbage, so the farmer needs to import in a little bit more feedstocks into the system. So it gives a good idea about the benefits and trade-offs there in terms of willow. Sorry, not willow, but actually in terms of willow, Aaron worked with Chris on this, and this is really interesting, and if people are interested in this, is to look at, there's a report that Chris has published on this, looking at if you replace grass with willow in these buffer strips, what is the impact that has on gross margins. So that's worth looking at as well. So what Erin did then was she worked closely with Suzanne, and they looked at the selection of farms in the Blackwater catchment, and they looked at different scenarios. And this scenario here that they looked at with the farm model was, just if we improve nutrient management on these farms to best management practices, if we aimed for a soil pH of 6.2, if we aim for a target soil pH of about -2, which is about 21 milligrams per litre, that manure is applied on a P basis rather than an N basis, which is important, and that the plant requirements was met by manure or fertilizer, but also by what's in the soil as well. So you're drawing down what's in the soil, and then the nitrogen was kept the same throughout the simulation. And Aaron was able to kind of predict this over a 10-year period, and the impact this would have in terms of the gross margins, and it's expressed here as savings. Okay, just to explain, on the x-axis here you have a 10-year period. On the y-axis you have savings to the farmer. If it's at zero, which at the top here, if it's at zero, it means there's no savings. If it goes up to 500 or 1,000, it's costing the farmer money. If it goes down to minus figures, it's a savings for the farmer. And this is just one particular farm from the Blackwater catchment. It's a farm that's 55 hectares. It is at stocking density around 50 cows, so it's very heavily stocked, in fact. And it's only spreading slurry on 23 hectares of that farm. And soil P is varying from about 9 right up to 92, I think it says, which is very high, whatever way we look at it, it's very, very high soil P. So what Erin did here was she applied that scenario which I presented in the last slide, and it looked at, well, what would be the impact on that farm? Well, overall, by just applying that scenario, improved nutrient management, where the farmer is getting all of the fields to index -2, Erin was able to show that the farmer was saving about £1,000 a year. But that meant, and where there's complexity here, is that meant the farmer had to export 12% of the slurry every year. That's not factored into the savings, okay? That's separate to the savings. The farmer, not every year, sorry, 12% of the slurry in the first couple of years had to be exported. But the farmer was able to, had to bring in some additional fertilizer in terms of phosphorus and nitrogen to bring up the yield in some of the grazing fields. But they were able to reduce the amount of feed that was going into the farm. And overall it was a saving of about £1,000 a year. Now this is just one scenario, and I suppose the interesting thing here is that going forward this could be used as a tool to look at, for policymakers to look at, well, what is the impact of these different scenarios we're thinking about for the nutrient action program? What is the impact, and that's going to have on farmers' bottom line? And you could look at a scenario here where you say, okay, let's reduce soil P to index 1, and we'll go for a very low soil P index 1 in some of these areas. And this can be done on a field by field basis and then aggregated up to a farm basis. And you could see what impact that would have on the gross margins of the farm. You could look at reducing stock numbers. You could look at a whole range of different issues, change in the price of feed, change in the price of fertilizer. It could all be factored into the model. So it's quite a I think a very good tool coming out of CatchmentCARE that can now be taken forward and used by policymakers into the future. So as I suppose the whistle-stop tour of all of the work that's been done, but I suppose we've been very focused at trying to get as many outputs out of this as possible. And if you look at the CatchmentCARE website, there's animations there that Suzanne Higgins and videos that Suzanne put together around nutrient management, trying to make that as accessible as possible. And there's also reports there, particularly around the modelling that Russell has done. And there's other reports there in relation to the farmyard risk assessments and the other work. There's also infographics there again, trying to make the science as accessible as possible. But the key thing for us is having an impact on policy and changing policy going forward. And there are also a number of publications that came out of this in terms of peer-reviewed publications from the work. So again, I'd just like to thank all my colleagues in AFBI because they've done amazing work over the last number of years. And hopefully this work will have a legacy going forward and help improve policy related to nutrient management in Northern Ireland and in the Republic. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I would like now to introduce Dr. Sean Burke, who is going to talk on protecting the groundwater resource. Sean was the work package lead for the groundwater work as part of CatchmentCARE, and he's an expert in surface water quality, hydrochemistry and resource protection. And he developed a demonstration test, Catchments, a joint initiative between the Environmental Agency and DEFRA to support the implementation of the EU Water Framework Directive, and more recently he's focused, as you can see there, on protecting water resources from agricultural pollution. Is Sean here?
Yeah.
Here he is. Brilliant. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, as Andy said at the start, you don't our workshops that was on there for long, put it off as lunch, which I think is quite soon, so we're behind time. It's not quick as to get through this, but so basically, I just like to acknowledge my colleagues on this, Paul Wilson from GSNI, Sally Williams from GSI, and Quaver. This has been a real team effort over the last 4 or 5 years, over the last 5 years. Trying to get some of the line during COVID wasn't easy getting access to the field. So why is groundwater resource and water resources important? Well, at least off the world's population suffer some polluted water. It's an asset that is valuable, extremely valuable in coastal areas where we have rising sea levels. And once groundwater is polluted, then it's extremely difficult then to remediate that and clean that up. So how do we understand groundwater? So we go out in the field and we identify areas where we drill groundwater monitoring points. But it's not just a matter of turning up with a drilling rig and getting the rigs on site and just drilling away. There's an awful lot of work before that goes to identify sites, making sure we've got access, and key is getting cooperation from the landowner. And Paul and Tally led most of this work. A big thanks to Tom Woods and Fidelma and Alan McCabe as well for helping us identify these sites. Without those little people on the ground, it's extremely difficult to talk with farmers and landowners and agree to take a rig like this on site and find the right window of opportunity as weather issues always indicate when we can drill. And it's not always easy, but we managed to drill 50 borehole. We drilled boreholes in the Finn catchment, we drilled boreholes in the Blackwater catchment, and we drilled boreholes in the Jer catchment. And we also drilled additional boreholes at Hillsborough. We drilled these boreholes at different depths, and we drilled these boreholes to try and understand where the water's sitting, the groundwater's sitting, and what the groundwater's doing, and what actually the chemistry of the groundwater is as well. We also, in the Arnie catchment, because it's dominantly cars, which means the water flows like through pipes, big fractures in the rocks, and Queen Ricky, she's the expert on this in the Arnie catchment, and this is the spring monitoring where groundwater emerges at the surface in these sort of environments, and we monitored flow. I think it was at 17 different discharge points in the Arnie catchment, and additional 2 existing boreholes. We did 6 rounds of sampling at all the boreholes and all the spring monitoring points as well. We did those over a period of 2 years to look at the chemistry, to see what was happening, to see what the quality of the groundwater was, and to see how it was impacting on surface water, and see if there was any parallels between the chemistry of the surface water and the chemistry of the groundwater. Our findings that overall the groundwater quality is generally good. In quite a lot of the catchments, there's a strong correlation between surface and groundwater in some locations, especially in the Derg, where there's a connection between the surface water and the groundwater. And groundwater is sustaining what is good in rivers. It's there as a huge resource that flows into the rivers. And the quantity was better than we initially thought. We was quite surprised in the Blackwater catchment, where we had what we called artesian flow, where water flowed out of the surface when we actually drilled down, and Paul's been busy putting caps on these to make sure that everything's tight. Our outputs for most of this work, we've produced some site folders and borehole pipes, groundwater chemistry reports for the 5 catchments that we've looked at. We've put a site selection process report. There's a lot of decision making goes on where and when you drill. And we've got a summary report there as well. One of the speakers in Andy's panel, one of the panel speakers in Andy's session mentioned about, is he going to get another file from the end of this? And we wanted to move beyond just producing these sort of reports, and CatchmentCARE is all about legacy. So we tried to look at better ways we could create more legacy from the project. So we've got 50 walls, 17 groundwater monitoring stations and 17 springs. The NIRA are already using some of these boreholes. The GSNI have incorporated boreholes into groundwater level monitoring. The GSNI convert instruments into boreholes for future work, and look, especially with climate change. And then again, the only catchment cases reforming local assessment and management plans for the root catchment, particular sensitive area. We've also working in local schools and at Stranraer, just down the road from here, we've got some boreholes right there, and we're looking at the plans underway for BT Young Scientists projects. Telly's got a TV screen down there, which we're working with the local schools on as well. All samples of data are all already being used and analysed by 2 funded projects, and results informing Northern Ireland's water groundwater abstraction programme within the Blackwater and the Derg catchments. And again, working with Marcus, ABC, Borough Council, investigating the use of artesian boreholes. And then we have identified individual research projects that we will undertake in some of these catchments, and looking at, as we move into decarbonisation, we're looking at using some of these systems to better understand the potential for shallow geothermal systems. So we can move towards a further decarbonisation. So that's the 3 major project legacies that we did, but we also wanted to go further than that. We wanted to actually start to influence the younger generation, and working with Andy as part of his community programme. We started to look at living digital outputs, and some of you have seen this, and it's in the foyer site. So we've explored the headsets also, please have a look at those headsets in there. So basically what we've developed is a visualisation methodology to actually undertake, so school kids can look at and adults can look at how groundwater works, not just looking at a book, but looking through headsets and looking at it 360s, in a 360 world. And basically the pictures on the right show what it's like using augmented reality at the top, and the one below is some schools and from the Marble Caves. So we've loaned some of these headsets out for community rollout, and we're here at the final project meeting, and one of the project problems with these big projects is that they come to an end and how we roll out all the information that we've collected. So we're working with the Locks Agency, and at the top right where the Locks Agency have used it as part of their community engagement, and they've got a few of our experience posters there, and the feedback from both the Locks Agency and the Marble Locks Caves has been fantastic, and it's been particularly welcome from school teachers in the area that over kids that struggle with just sitting and reading textbooks, and they're finding this is a lot more easier way of learning about groundwater. I've been doing groundwater research and catchment management for a long time. I even did this with Paul Quinn when we were considered young a long time ago. And doing the science can be relatively easy, changing behaviours and raising awareness in the community about some of the environmental problems. That's the rocket science, that's the difficult bit. So you can see on the right, bottom right there, that's what the screen looks like on the headsets when you put these Oculus headsets on. And we've got a series of modules there that you can see. And you can do this in teaching mode, or you can do it in solo mode. And anybody in the world, from anybody all over the world, can actually look at this in the classrooms anywhere else in the world. So you can pause this, and kids can put their hands up and they can ask questions. And there's some, there's awful lot of stuff in there. We've got some of the videos in there that Andy Griggs produced, that you mentioned earlier, about each of the fin and about water and the Orny catchment. And it's just a tool there to go on and engage and raise awareness. And hopefully with the rollout that's building on some of the work that Andy's done and what the Locks Agency is doing for us, and the Marble Locks Caves, that will go on and create, more younger scientists and let them engage in groundwater and see how groundwater is important within their particular catchments. So this is what we were assigned from the letter. In the letter of offer is to develop 50 cross-border groundwater monitoring wells. As a team, we wanted to do an awful lot more than that, so we've done an awful lot of groundwater flow, spring monitoring and borehole groundwater level monitoring. We've done some preliminary pumping tests and borehole temperature profiles. We've done some groundwater sampling, and we've done the groundwater visualisation. I'd just like to thank Con for his support in the visualisation. Con saw the potential in that at an early stage, and I'd like to thank SAUPB giving us some flexibility at a later stage to add some additional modules onto that. And we've been updating conceptual models as data produce. So this is the question, but can you just press the, this might not work in an old video. So this is just a scene from the river restoration module, and it's interactive. It takes you down the stream, and you've got people there from the, some from the river system, Locks Agency, but I don't want to bet with them, those guys there. But it's interactive. You can speak to these guys, and speak to you. You've got some kit sampling going off there, and it's 360. You can spin yourself all the way around and look backwards, and then you're looking at some of the people we've seen, John about riverbank fencing, acidity problems from trees, and it's just another spanner in the box to engage in a different way. And obviously that remains.
Very much. Thank you so much. It's such an interesting use of technology for all of our collective imaginations. So we've got a final session now with 3 guests. Dr. Jenny Deacon is the manager of the Catchment Science and Management Unit in the EPA. Dr. Gareth Greer, PSO South and East River Basic District, NIEA Water Management Unit. And Dr. Kiva Hickey is a hydrogeologist in the Groundwater and Geothermal Unit of the Geological Survey of Ireland. Kiva, it's interesting, isn't it, to see, I remember talking to some geologists in university, and it was always such a intangible thing. It's just impossible to even imagine it. And I imagine after doing the AR, VR, you're going to have a whole cohort of young people who might be interested now in getting involved in groundwater and that kind of use of technology to explore something that is very hard to imagine and describe.
Yeah, I think that was one of the big pluses of this project is like to be able to install 50 boreholes and actually really look at the groundwater, because it's, as you say, it's you can't see it and it's often forgotten. You know, it's hidden. A lot of people don't understand it. They don't understand the pathways, the importance of it for our rivers and our ecosystems. And so yeah, I mean, we got such good feedback from, especially from children, adults as well, with VR and AR, because they've just never experienced it, never, and you can really see it. And also to have these 50 boreholes is an amazing legacy, for the future.
And you talk about the pathways. There's an interesting, I don't know whether it's related to the work that you did, but it's an interesting video on the CatchmentCARE YouTube site looking at using dyes to, 4 days later, where is the water ending up? I mean, all of this from a scientific perspective is fascinating, but just from a general public perspective is really, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it really captures the public's mind as well, and things like the source of the River Shannon. It's actually 15 kilometres away from where it starts. But obviously that's kind of, interesting. But then from a mitigation point of view, if you're trying to put in measures, but actually the source of the nutrients is coming from 15 kilometres away or whatever, you need to be able to understand that before, and the measures are going to be effective or whatever like that. But yeah, we were really lucky that the SUI project, we had 2 amazing geologists and hydrogeologists that happened to live in Catchment, Les Brown and John Kelly. So they're, like, talking about legacy, the CIS project, the Community Incentive Project, funded the equipment that they needed for the dye tracing, but they're just so keen and interested in it, and they're both cavers, so they're going to continue that tracing now for the next whatever years, just for their own interests, which is great. So it's going to be, the information is going to be coming in, and we're going to understand the catchments and the aquifers and the dynamics and everything, way after the project's finished, which is great.
And a very interesting way to visualise the impact of somebody putting something into a water body and where it might end up.
Yeah,
this idea of responsibility.
Yeah, so there was like a community day where everyone was going to come and watch a dye trace happening, but of course with COVID then it was a video, as the one you referenced. But I mean, it'd be a good thing to do again because it's so visual and
so visual.
You can just see the green and you can pick it up, a few kilometres away or whatever. So,
Jenny, I've been relieved and delighted that we haven't heard too much about the climate crisis in these sessions this morning. It's nice to get away from it for a while, but the reality is that everything is overshadowed. All the problems, all the challenges overshadowed by this additional horror that we're in and that's facing us. When we talk about building resilience, I suppose climate change is at the heart of that.
Yeah, absolutely, Ellen. I think some of the really useful outputs of this project, we tend to think of and manage environmental problems in terms of their sources where the contaminants arise, how those sources get to the waters, so the pathways, and then the receptors, or the rivers, the lakes, the coasts, and what we're trying to protect. And usually our legislation goes after the source and try to manage the source of the problem. But actually, what was really, I thought, enlightening of the CatchmentCARE project was an awful lot more focus on the pathways, and particularly the restoration of the receptors and building more resilience in those receptors in terms of habitat diversity and the riparian zones and keeping the shade to bring the temperatures down, all of which is going to be so important when our temperatures rise with climate change, when we get more heavy rainfall, when we get more runoff. We're going to need to build that resilience into our ecosystems to be able to cope with that extra stress and pressure that comes from climate change. So I thought there were some really good scientific learnings coming out of the various different modules, which is really fantastic in terms of the legacy.
And Gareth, I mean, we saw the NI abstraction programme in the Blackwater and Durban mentioned there. To what extent, I mean, this CatchmentCARE project is about legacy, and the legacy is embedded in informing policy. To what extent will this project inform policy into the future?
I think there's a huge amount to come out of this project. The department's involved in quite a number of Interreg projects as well, and there's a huge amount of work going on in the department now about just how we take forward all of the learnings out of these. In particular with CatchmentCARE, the work that Donica mentioned there around the nutrient advice, that's a huge area coming forward now. We have a soil nutrient health scheme which has just been launched. The first year of that is just complete. It's a 4-year programme which will give every farm in Northern Ireland a baseline of its soil nutrient status, and there's a huge amount of information there, and as policymakers and government we have to be there in terms of the right advice to go to those farmers. And as Donica mentioned, there's a huge amount of farms out there who aren't working at high intensity, and we need to tailor that advice specifically to those farms. So they're not putting the inputs onto the land, and therefore we're not seeing those impacts on the waterways that we're all picking up in terms of water quality monitoring.
And I suppose with tying in the education, the community involvement, and as we heard before, this idea that, you know, there's more children involved in angling, the more you can get the community eyes on the rivers, the more you can get the community involved in that, the more the farmers will be increasingly open to making sure that they can do their part as well.
Absolutely, that community involvement is a key element, and you know, just the sheer numbers of people that were involved in this project was amazing, and we really want to see how we can keep that interest going. There's a huge amount of interest in terms of the general public around water quality. You see it on the news around sewage discharges now, and all of the education work that's been done. It's really key that we harness that and build on that, because we're all aware of, you know, government can't improve water quality on its own. We really need that community involvement. It's been great to see the interest, as Marcus said. More people are interested in biodiversity and leisure centres, so we just need to capture that and build on that.
It makes things a lot easier than, we'll say, 10, 15 years ago. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Jenny, one of the things that Sean said that I've heard other scientists say, which is doing the science is easy, changing behaviours is the difficult bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I thought again through this project that it's really striking the amount of work that went on in catchments and the engagement with the local people and the communities, and the focus on the education and the legacy tools in schools, etc. And you know, that's hard stuff to do, to mobilise. It's costly, it's time consuming, to build trust, and all of that is such a critical component to the overall story of improving water quality. And I think we can't underestimate the need for the resource to be focused at that element of the work as well as the science. Absolutely.
And finally, Kiva, we have this solid legacy, this physical legacy of the boreholes. You have the schools work. You also have the mapping. Am I correct in that there's been enhancement in the mapping at the back of this project?
Yeah, and I mean, in some ways the borehole stuff is only starting, you know, like it's at the very tip of the iceberg, hopefully, of what can be done. I mean, those boreholes are drilled now. There's actually nearly 70 monitoring points if you include the springs. You know, they're there now, and hopefully for future projects, for research and everything, and like, they'll offer a real insight, you know, like, I don't know any
scientists, I thought it was a great idea.
Yeah. I don't know any other project that has that density of, you know, looking into the groundwater and trying to understand the groundwater and what influence it has, but also the transferability of that with other similar catchments. You know, if there's a catchment with similar bedrock and similar, you know, what can we learn to those other catchments as well, which I think is really important. So we have a water level website on GSI, and they will be going up. You know, they're up there, and the data is there. You can see them in real time and stuff.
So this is gwlevel.ie.
Yes, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yes. Okay, Jenny, Gareth, and Kiva, thank you all so much. So we've come to the end of the 3 sessions, and my head is so full of all the different aspects of this project. You know, Sean said CatchmentCARE is all about legacy, and I think you've been witness to the sheer quantity of the legacy that is involved in the 5-year project itself, and it's very, very heartening to hear it. We are going to close now with closing remarks from Mary Gurry, Water Programme Manager from the Environmental Protection Agency, and then after her, Katrina Davis, Head of Water Management Unit in the Northern Ireland Environmental Agency. And after Mary and Katrina speak, we're delighted to have our guest speaker, Mr. Joe Mahan from the top-rated Lesser Spotted Ulster on UTV to make the concluding remarks for this CatchmentCARE project conference. Mary.
Thanks, Ella, and well done on keeping us all on track and on time. That's been a really full morning, and thanks to Con for inviting me to speak. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here, I have to say. Working in water quality, as you all know, probably at times can be a bit deflating, and you're reporting on declines, and you come down to something like this and you hear all the good work that's going on, and I'm with a bit of a boost of adrenaline now and the spring and step again. So it's been a really good morning. Well done to all the speakers who packed so much into such a short amount of time. I've been scribbling notes furiously, and I know there'll be lots more conversations to be had over time. You can get that sense of pride. There was just such a buzz around yesterday evening and this morning
and the pride in the work, and it's fantastic to see it. So we all know, and certainly in this room, that water quality is essential. It's essential for our health, our well-being, our communities, our economies, and it's vital that we protect it. And people say, you protect what you value. So how do you get somebody to value something? And I think the work that has been described, the interaction with the communities and the education programme is really key to that, building awareness and understanding of how important water quality is and what's going on and what's local. That really resonates, I think, for people. And I think the number was 22,000 people and community members have been involved, which is fantastic. And the ripple effect of that, hopefully, will endure. The EPA, as you know, we're a scientific body. We're assessing and monitoring and assessing and reporting on water quality, and the challenge always is, well, what's going on? What's causing those improvements? What's causing the declines? Can we understand it? So it's really important, like the measures that have gone in, across here, that we hear about it, and today's been a really important starting point in explaining, the work that has been done and capturing that. And I think a legacy of the project will be capturing those learnings, sharing them, and I'm delighted to hear some of the agencies saying they'll be continuing the work, the monitoring infrastructure, the boreholes are in place. Different agencies will be continuing to look at different areas, and that over time, water quality is a marathon, it's not a sprint. You don't get instant results. You do all this work trying to undo damage bit by bit. And that, over time, you'll start to see that then coming through in the water quality, as well as all the other benefits, that we will see the outcomes of all this work coming through. So it'll be really important to capture them, to share them, and to keep looking at it and seeing how it pans out over the coming years. I've done a Joe Biden now, I've gone off track, so I'm getting so back on track. I think to use a cliche, I think I said already, protecting water quality is a marathon, not a sprint, and we need vigilance. We can get those improvements and get the work in, and then we have to sustain that and keep at it, keep the protection. And I think projects like CatchmentCARE are just key to that. Building that resilience in the communities by involving so many stakeholders, all the different agencies, the universities, farmers, communities, schools. It's absolutely fantastic. And it does sound like it will leave an enduring legacy, which is really important. So just to wrap up, really just to say congratulations to everyone involved over the last 5.5 years, who've overcome so many challenges, not least a global pandemic in the middle of it, which apart from anything else certainly could have scuppered stuff. So how everybody got creative and we're doing that is just fantastic. We certainly will look forward to seeing the impact of all the work, hopefully, and the energy and the engagement coming through in the water quality results. Hopefully someday we'll be out with a good news story and we'll have moved the dial, and we'll see those improvements over time. So thanks again to all the organisers and all the speakers today.
Good afternoon, everybody. Katrina Davis from the Northern Ireland Environment Agency. I just want to say, wow, I think is what I want to start with. But I want to say thank you to Ella for your coordination and timekeeping this morning. And thank you to Mary. And we didn't confer, but they're very similar, so I'll pick out some of the things that you haven't already. And thank you to Con for the invitation to speak today. It's with great pleasure that I actually have sat back and thought, this is fantastic, what's going on across the Ireland environment and the partnership work and what's going on. The relatively short time frame in the last 5.5 years, there have been some fantastic achievements, and we have seen that from all the presentations today. And I started off trying to make notes of all the different things that I had written and referring to those as I got up here and thought, there's just so many. And even the people who've been heavily involved were finding it hard to capture that within the short time frame. But as one of the funding agencies in Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, it's fantastic to see that the collaboration is coming to fruition. Apart from the COVID challenges, I have to pay tribute to the work that was done and how things were changed, and getting people out into the environment and getting them to realise that we can do these things outdoors. We don't have to sit in a classroom, but getting that learning then online to enable that legacy to be taken forward. So turning something that was very negative into a very positive, I think really deserves congratulations in that point of view. Sarah referred to the pressures on the water environment. Protecting our freshwater environment is vital to the long-term improvements in the water quality that we have responsibility for under the Water Framework Directive. Air, obviously, and water are the two essential requirements for our life. Water in itself obviously is important for all our industry, for our agriculture, for our angling environment, for our biodiversity. And we are very aware, the people in this room today, that water doesn't stop flowing across borders. And one of my mantras is we need everybody to learn to value our water environment. And it's something that I have talked about for years, is how we get people to appreciate and to value our water. In Northern Ireland Environment Agency, we are responsible through the river basin planning process, and we hope to be able to publish our final plan later in the year if it gets executive approval and that comes back up and running. And we're delivering that through our programme of measures. And sitting back today, listening to all that is going on and thinking, that ticks the box, that ticks the box, that ticks the box. These are delivering it on the ground for what we need to be able to bring forward through the river basin planning process. And I want to pay tribute to that and all of those people involved in the community groups. And one of the things that, as a parent, knowing the children home from school, what did you do today? What goes on in each year as to this is the year that we go out into the rivers, this is the year that we bring the fry in and do all the things that we do. And they look forward to getting into that year to actually doing that before. And they bring that home, and you think of the multiplier effect that has. So it is fantastic to see that there's over 5,000 children already engaged and the legacy that we take forward. Also paying tribute to our own staff on CatchmentCARE and the work that they put into it, but our other catchment officers who are out there on the ground every day doing the bit that we need to do as an agency, and also then working with the different community groups and different people and taking that work forward. I had a long list of things, but I'm not going to go through all of those of the things that have been achieved. But what I want to say is the range and number of partners that have collaborated to deliver CatchmentCARE is something that each and every one of you should be extremely proud of. And to say that all good things must come to an end, we're here today to mark the end of CatchmentCARE, but it's only the end of the beginning. In my view, what has been achieved in CatchmentCARE leaves a strong legacy to develop and take forward through these already established forums and partnerships. The hard work has been done in creating those partnerships and getting those community agencies on board. So the number of presenters today referred to the legacy, the storyboards that are on the websites, the fantastic visual tools that are there, the educational legacy, the community legacy, all of those things are critical, and that hard work has been done. So we need to try and maintain that momentum. So how do we do that? Through taking forward the legacy, looking at the future funding streams, and hopefully Peace Plus and SCUPB will bring that forward later this year so that people can get the opportunity to put in their bids for taking those things forward. Reference to Donica in the legacy for policy going forward, which is obviously critical from our point of view as a government agency. The soil nutrient health scheme, the other things that the department are currently working on, all of those things will match together. But it's the catchment focus that I think is the really, really good point of delivery, is where all the agencies get together in priority catchments and they do the work, and that's where we will see the results starting to improve our water quality environment. So very quickly, finishing on, and I can't give credit to Mr. Owner who said it was an anonymous quote: the past is your lesson, the present your gift, and the future is your motivation. So let's build on the motivation that we have in the room today. Thank you.
First of all, I should thank Colin for inviting me here, and when he sent me a copy of the agenda, I said, Colin, you're crazy, you're never going to fit all of this in before 1 o'clock. I'm going to be the last thing people want to hear before they get their lunch, so here I am, the last thing that you're going to hear before you get your lunch, I hope. First thing I want to say as well is that, well, I said to Colin it'll be a miracle if we get to that point, but I didn't realise that he had a miracle worker here who did a fantastic job, elegant studies, not only with speed but with
grace and elegance as well. Brilliant job, Ella, well done. Okay, I come from the world of television, and it's delightful to see a number of very familiar faces who have helped me in the past make a number of those kinds of programmes, and I hope that that's going to be the case in the future. So I usually think that television has a great role to play in getting the message across of all of the achievements of CatchmentCARE and similar enterprises. But you know, it also works the other way around. If you look at the end panel of most television programmes these days, you'll see a little white sticker at the bottom, a little white graphic. It's called Albert Certification. Have you been familiar with that? Have you seen it? We need that little sticker in order to get our programmes on air. I make programmes for UTV and BBC, and they tell us, they told us about 2 or 3 years ago, we can't use your programmes, no matter how good or bad they are, it doesn't matter, unless you have Albert Certification. And that is an organisation which is tying up all the broadcasters into making sure that the programmes that they put out have taken steps to reduce their own carbon footprint in production. Okay? So we set about to try to reduce our, what I would have said, minimal carbon footprint in the first place, because there's only a few cars. We don't really do very much in terms of impacting the environment. We take 2 flasks of water with us, and we have tea and sandwiches at the back. And so we said, okay, we'll move from using paper cups, from using polystyrene cups to paper cups, and now we have permanent reusable cups. And we wrote back to the people in Albert and said, yes, that's a good step, but it's not enough. We also need more from you to reduce your carbon footprint. So we then had to make sure we bought 100% recycled paper. We had to send them photographs and invoices and receipts and things like that. And he said, yes, that's another step towards it. But what else can you do? We can't give you a certificate just on the basis of that. So we said, does the content of our programme have any impact on your? Well, it could do, they said. So what we did was send them transcripts of Katrina Downey, the Locks Agency, and myself, sampling the water quality in the River Deal, and transcripts of Sarah McLean and Kieran McGonigal and I talking about how you improve the quality of the water to promote the growth of native oysters, and also Alan Keyes planting comfrey plants in the banks of the river in Ballinderry to improve or to filter out the impurities from the runoff from the farm into his beloved Ballinderry River. And we sent these across to the Albert people and said, sure, why didn't you send us that in the first place? That's exactly the kind of thing. And they gave us hundreds of marks for that, and we got an Albert certification. So we can't make programmes without you people, in other words. That's the point I'm trying to make. So that's the attitude that possibly you should take into the future as well. Use television as a resource, but remember, there are aspects of TV that need you as well. Now, the kind of programmes that we do, yes, they're to do with the environment, but they're also to do very much with history. And I was trying to think of how this kind of an event would have looked if you'd held it 280 years ago, right? What would be the concerns of people about the catchment that they lived in those days, and what would they have done about it? And the reason I chose that 280 years ago is that we recently did a programme on Points Pass. That would be within the Andy Griggs area and Marcus Malley. They would know Points Pass, but that's in the ABC Council area. And very briefly, I'll try to keep this brief as I can. In Points Pass, there is the Newry Canal, or what remains of the Newry Canal. The Newry Canal was opened in 1742. And the reason it's important in Points Pass is because between Points Pass and Scarva, that is the longest stretch of summit-level canal back in the day in the whole of the world, and even now I don't think anybody has got a summit-level canal so long. What that means is that the water from this canal really was built from Loughney, connecting eventually to Dublin, but really to Newry in the first place. The levels of Loughney were far below the land that it had to cover. So it had to be stepped up, it had to be raised to 40 feet from Loughney until it got as far as Points Pass, and then it had to step down until it got down towards Newry and up in that direction. And when they opened this canal, this was to most people a vitally important thing to do, because what they were going to do is bring coal from County Tyrone, from Culloden, across Loughney, down the Newry Canal, and bring it down into Dublin. And I would imagine that in 1742, that would have been the crucial thing that was happening anywhere in the country. For starting off, it created massive employment. There was never a bigger full-scale employment project, I think, anywhere in the country. There were so many people involved that they ran out of spades. Remember, this is pre-mechanisation, so really what they were using is long-tail shovels, and they had to share them. I believe at one stage 6 men had to share one shovel. You dig the bottom and hand the spade up to me, and I do the next bit, and so on and so on. So I imagine that in the year 1740, so sometimes when you're doing history programs, you not only have a longitude and a latitude, you just go back in time, but when you get back in that time, you kind of look sideways. What else has happened? What are the contemporaneous factors that would have impacted on building a canal, for example, at that particular time? As I said, it opened in 1742. In 1740, in the annals of Irish history, is known as Blian an Air, the year of slaughter. And for once in Irish history, it had nothing to do with battles or wars, unless you're talking about the battle or war they had against nature. But Blian an Air was the year, comes at the end of the Little Ice Age, as it was called. And for over 18 months, you could not dig a sod in the country anywhere, simply because it was frozen concrete hard. It was 2 years of the driest and coldest winters and indeed summers that the country experienced. People said that inside some of the houses in Dublin it was minus 12 degrees. Every drop of water in the country froze solid. At that stage in Ireland in 1740, the main dependency, food dependency, would have been grains rather than potatoes. And what you need for grains, of course, would be mills, mill wheels, grinding, creating the flour. So if the rivers were all frozen up, then the mill wheels were not turning, and there was no bread created, quite simply. The population of Ireland at that time was 2.4 million people, and between 13 and 20%, depending on where you lived, of the population died of starvation or diseases related to starvation and cold. Nobody could eat themselves. Nobody could feed themselves. And that, believe it or not, is a higher proportion of population than died in the Great Famine 100 years later in 1840. So that's a higher proportion of people died as a result of something we never talk about now. And it was caused by, and this is the counter-narrative that doesn't suit us today, it was caused by a climate crisis. It was caused by a natural climate crisis. It was caused by nature saying, I'm not playing along any longer, I'm not saying any summertime, or I'm not saying any springtime, you're just getting winter for 2 years. And because of the dependency on grain, that's why it devastated the population of the country. And that's why it impelled those people digging the canal at Newry and Points Pass to work faster as soon as they could get a spade sunk in the ground, because what they were trying to bring was the relief, was coal from Coal Island down to Dublin. Now, as it turned out, the coal was useless because it was like brown coal, and it gave a lot of ash and wasn't very, very efficient. The point was, I think, that the attitude, the philosophical attitude, if they had a CatchmentCARE conference in those days, would have been, we don't trust nature. Nature is our enemy. Nature sends us famines. Nature sends us droughts. Nature sends us winters that we can't live through. And it would have fed into and have been countered or by the attitude, if you like, the romantic attitude of Wordsworth and the like, who believed in the pathetic fallacy, namely that nature nurtures us, nature cares for us. And they said, no, nature doesn't care for us. We have to conquer nature, we have to harness nature, we have to make sure nature does what we want it to do. That's why we need coal to create it, that's why we need our canal to take the coal down to Dublin, and that's why we don't trust nature again. And that attitude fed into what really this prestige that Ireland, which was the Industrial Revolution. So lessons were learned from that. We need more industry, we need more control of nature. We also need to stop depending on seeds and grains for our feed. Well, I have a good idea, let's everybody plant spuds. And they did for the next 100 years. And we know what the consequences of that was, monoculture and famine at the end of the day. But the whole attitude, the whole philosophy, if you like, of looking at ourselves, looking at humankind and nature as people or as two elements pitched in a permanent battle. Actually, it persists to this day. It persists in nearly every industry in the world, alongside the attitude that you might find here. It's an attitude that you can't blame people for thinking, yes, nature still creates earthquakes, tsunamis, it still creates famines. Some of it is by natural causes. The big difference between now and 1740 is that we are the ones in charge, we are the ones responsible for it. One of the, I think, wrong ways of thinking about nature being our adversary is that it puts humankind outside nature, almost as if we're not part of the natural world. There's the natural world and then there's us. But of course, that is to fail to understand our role. And our role is that we are part of the natural world. We are part and parcel of nature. We are part of this natural world we want to stand apart from. People said nature doesn't have a heart, doesn't have a soul, doesn't have a conscience, doesn't care whether it slaughters millions and millions of people. I contend, and I think that it's proper to contend, that nature does have a heart and a soul and a conscience. We, humankind, are its heart and its soul and its conscience. And if you look around at the people who are involved in CatchmentCARE, you're also its brains. And clearly that is visible here today. So what this introduces to the world, and what has introduced to the world, is it's a relatively novel way of looking at our relationship to nature. And long may it last, because anybody who's involved today in CatchmentCARE or for the future, you can rest assured that you are part of the heart and the soul, and thankfully, as is evidenced today, the brilliance of nature. So congratulations to everybody who's been involved. It's been a brilliant conference. I've learned a lot, and I'm sorry for keeping you so long from your lunch. Thank you very much.
And it's a lovely end to the conference, and I'm just here to say thank you so much, and well done, Con, for all your efforts, and the team, the amazing team behind you as well. There is a buffet lunch now for all of you, and there is, as you know, the project display stations are on view as well. So there's plenty to do, plenty of people to meet. Have a superb day, and I hope you can take the energy away with you into your work and into the future. Thank you very much.